A paranormal romance audiobook. The rain had been falling since dawn, the kind that did not simply wet you but claimed you, soaking through fabric and mood until even breathing felt heavier. Ivy kept her head down as she walked from Ridgeview Children's home to the school gates, shoulders tight beneath a thin jacket that had never truly belonged to her. It had been donated, like most things, and that meant it carried the faint smell of someone else's life. Her boots squelched. Every step made a small sound that seemed too loud, a betrayal of where she had been and what she was. She told herself that nobody cared, that everyone was too busy performing their own lives. Still, she felt the familiar pressure behind her eyes, the warning that if she let herself think about it too long, her throat would close and she would cry in public. No, not today. At her locker, she pulled off the boots and shoved them deep inside, wrapping them in an old plastic bag. She tried to dry her socks with paper towels and failed. Her fingers were cold enough to ache. She focused on the ache because it was easier than focusing on the hollow feeling that always waited behind her ribs. When she turned, Miles' heart was there, leaning with casual ownership against the row of lockers as if the corridor belonged to him. He always looked too clean for this place. Hair perfect. Uniform crisp. Smile sharp in a way that never meant kindness. "Did Ridgeview forget to feed you again?" he asked, voice loud enough for the nearby students to hear. "Or do you just like looking tragic?" Ivy's stomach clenched. She tasted metal, a faint bitterness that had started happening lately when she got angry. She did not understand it. She only knew it scared her. She stepped around him. "Move!" Miles laughed softly. He did not move. "You know, people would like you more if you tried less to be invisible." "I do not want people to like me," Ivy said. "That is good," Miles replied, "because you have the personality of wet cardboard." The words were designed to stick, designed to make her react. Ivy felt it, the hook, the familiar attempt to pull a performance out of her so he could hold it up for everyone. She forced her hands to unclench. "Go bother someone who cares," she said, and walked away. Behind her, she heard him murmur something to someone else. There was laughter. Her shoulders tightened, but she kept moving. All morning, she felt eyes on her, even when nobody was looking directly. It was not paranoia. It was something else, something sharper. Recently, her awareness had begun to stretch beyond normal, like her senses had grown teeth. She could hear too much. Not just the loud talk and the scraping chairs, but distant whispers, the rustle of paper in classrooms she was not even in, the click of a pen capped 2 corridors away. It made her feel like the world was too close, pressing in from every direction. In chemistry, Ivy sat in the back and kept her notes neat. Order was a kind of protection. If her page was perfect, then maybe she could be too. A shadow fell over her desk. Miles slid into the seat beside her without asking. "Hey," he said, too sweet. Ivy did not look up. "No," he blinked. "No what?" "No to whatever you want." Miles leaned closer. His cologne cut through the chemical smell of the lab and made her head swim. "You have the homework, right? The worksheet. I just need to copy it." Ivy wrote another line in her notebook, the pencil steady. "Do it yourself." "You act like it is sacred," he said. "It is just chemistry." "It is my work," Ivy replied. And I said no. His smile thinned. "You know what happens to people who make me look stupid." The old fear tried to rise. The one that had grown in her at Ridgeview, the fear of authority, of consequences, of being called difficult and punished for it. But something else rose with it. Something hot and unfamiliar that pulsed in her arms and made her skin feel too tight. She turned her head slowly and met his eyes. Miles flinched, almost imperceptibly. His confidence slipped for a fraction of a second. Ivy's voice came out quiet. "I do not belong to you." There was a pause. Then Miles's expression smoothed back into cruelty. "Right," he said. "You belong to nobody." He stood, knocking her chair slightly as if by accident. As he walked away, he muttered, "Orphan charity case," loud enough for her to hear. The word orphan hit like a shove. She had heard it 1,000 times, but today it landed differently. Today it sparked. In literature class, Ivy sat with her book open, but the words blurred. Her hearing picked up too much again, fragments of conversation like knives. "Ridgeview," someone whispered. "That is where the problem kids are. I heard she attacked someone once." "Is that true?" Miles sat a few rows away, turned slightly in his chair so he could watch her. When she glanced up, he smiled as if they shared a joke. The teacher, Mr. Lewis, began discussing symbolism, voice calm, trying to build a world of books inside a room full of restless teenagers. Ivy usually liked literature. It was one of the few places she could disappear safely. Today she felt pinned. Miles raised his hand, not to answer but to perform. He made a snide remark about the main character, twisting it into something humiliating about weakness. Laughter scattered across the room. Mr. Lewis's gaze sharpened. "Miles, the book is not asking you to audition for a stand-up routine. Try again with an actual point." More laughter, but it shifted. Not all of it was on Miles's side now. Miles's jaw tightened. He glanced toward Ivy as if blaming her for the teacher's correction. Mr. Lewis continued, "And if your father needs to hear that you are wasting class time again, I can call him." The room went still. Miles's face drained of its smugness. "No, sir." "Then sit down," Mr. Lewis said. Miles sat. Ivy should have felt relief. Instead, she felt dread. She knew Miles. He did not forget humiliation. He stored it. When the bell rang for break, Ivy gathered her books quickly. She tried to leave before Miles could intercept her. She made it to the corridor, heart easing a fraction. Then a hand brushed her shoulder. Light touch, too intimate. Ivy froze. Miles's voice was low, close to her ear. "You are going to regret making me look small." Ivy swallowed. "Get away from me." "I will," he said, "in a minute, after I take what I want." Her stomach turned. She stepped back hard, but he only smiled as if her fear tasted good. "See you next class," he murmured and walked away. Ivy's hands shook. She pressed them to her thighs, trying to hide it. The corridor felt too bright, too loud. Sounds poured in. Lockers slamming, shoes on tile. Laughter. Someone chewing gum. Someone crying in a bathroom stall far down the hall. Her head throbbed. She found an empty stretch of wall near a window and slid down, pulling her sketchbook from her bag. Drawing was the only thing that made her mind quiet. She opened to a blank page and began to sketch without thinking, lines forming a shape that had been haunting her dreams. A feline face, ears tufted, eyes too intelligent, too knowing. A lynx. The pencil moved faster, as if her hand remembered what her mind refused to name. She shaded amber eyes. The look in them made her chest ache with something like longing. A shadow fell across the page. Ivy jerked her head up. Miles stood there. He held something in his hand, her diary. The one she kept hidden beneath her mattress at Ridgeview, the one she had stupidly brought to school because she had needed to write last night, needed to bleed words onto paper so she did not bleed them into her own skin. Ivy's mouth went dry. "Give that back." Miles's eyes glittered. "So you do have secrets." He opened it with slow, deliberate care, like a man peeling back skin. No, Ivy said, and her voice cracked. Do not. Miles ignored her and began walking toward the classroom. Ivy lurched up, grabbing for it. He moved just out of reach and kept going, smiling. Students drifted back in as the second bell rang. Ivy followed him, panic burning through her ribs. Inside the classroom, Miles walked to the front as if he belonged there. He turned, diary in hand. Mr. Lewis frowned. Miles, sit down. Miles did not. He looked at Ivy, then at the room, then back at her, as if inviting an audience to watch her come apart. He began to read. At first, Ivy did not even process the words. Her own handwriting spoken aloud sounded wrong, exposed. Then meaning hit, and her vision narrowed. He read her private thoughts, the ones she had never said out loud, about Ridgeview, about waking in the night with the feeling that something in her was pacing behind her eyes, about the fear that she was broken in a way that could not be repaired, about longing for a mother whose face she could not remember, aching as if the absence was a physical organ that had been ripped out. Laughter rose, then awkwardly died as people realized they were hearing something too raw. Ivy stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. Mr. Lewis stepped forward, voice hard. Miles, give me that. Miles held the diary higher. Wait, sir, this part is my favorite. He read a line about dreams, about a world of fire and snow, about a warm furred body that was hers, running through trees, powerful and free, about waking with blood on her tongue like she had bitten herself to stop a sound from escaping. A student whispered, "What is wrong with her?" Ivy's ears caught it, sharp as glass. Miles's eyes locked on Ivy. He closed the diary and began walking toward her with a slow, predatory calm. Ivy's legs would not move. Her body felt both heavy and ready to spring, an impossible contradiction. Miles stopped in front of her. You really are pathetic, he murmured. But you know what? You are interesting when you are about to snap. He reached out and grabbed her chin. His fingers were warm. The touch made her skin crawl. Do not touch me, Ivy said, voice shaking. Miles smiled and leaned in. He kissed her. It was not a kiss that asked. It was a kiss that took, performed for the room. Ivy heard the gasp from someone, heard a chair scrape, heard her own pulse slam in her ears, too loud, too fast, like something trying to break out. For a second, she went numb, as if her body left to escape. Then heat exploded through her, ancient and furious. She shoved him back with both hands. Miles stumbled, surprised. Ivy's palms stung. Her nails felt wrong, sharper. She looked down and saw the tips darkened, hardened, curving slightly like claws. The room tilted. Miles's mouth twisted. What the hell? Ivy's breath came in a low sound she did not recognize. Her vision sharpened. Colors became too vivid. She could see tiny droplets of water on the window glass as if each one was a separate bead. She could smell fear, metallic and sour. The teacher's voice cut in. Ivy, calm down, breathe, breathe. She tried. The air felt like it scraped down her throat. Miles stepped closer again, emboldened by the attention. Look at you, he said. Freak. The word slammed into the part of her that had been holding the beast back. Ivy moved. It was not a decision. It was a release. She surged forward and struck him, not with a fist, but with her hand open, claws raking across his cheek. Skin tore. Blood welled bright against pale flesh. Miles screamed. The sound snapped something loose in the room. Students scrambled back. Someone shouted for help. Ivy did not stop. She grabbed Miles by the front of his shirt and shoved him into a desk. Wood cracked. Miles flailed, trying to protect his face. Ivy saw his fear and it fed her, made her stronger. It terrified her that it fed her. She heard Mr. Lewis yell her name. She heard footsteps running in the hall. She heard her own harsh growl. Miles finally managed to shove her off. Ivy stumbled, but her balance was wrong in a way that was right, feline ready. She could have gone back in. Then strong hands seized her from behind and dragged her away. The principal's voice cut through like a blade. Enough. Enough. Ivy fought for one more second, body straining, then she forced herself to stop. She stood trembling, claws retracting slowly as if reluctant. Miles lay on the floor, clutching his face, blood on his fingers. His eyes met Ivy's, wide with a horror that made her stomach drop. She had wanted him to suffer. That was the truth, and it was the worst thing she had ever known about herself. The principal, Ms. Danner, pointed toward the door. Miles to the nurse. Now. "And you," she said to Ivy, voice cold, "come with me." In the office, Ivy sat in a chair that felt too small, hands folded tight in her lap. She stared at the carpet and tried not to shake. Ms. Danner spoke without looking at her. "Do you understand what you did?" Ivy's throat burned. "He read my diary." "That does not justify violence," Ms. Danner snapped. "He is injured. He says you attacked him unprovoked." Ivy's head lifted. "He kissed me." Ms. Danner's mouth tightened, as if she did not want to hear it. "Miles Hart is from a respected family. You are from Ridgeview. Tell me why I should believe you." The words were calm. The violence in them was quiet and surgical. Ivy felt something inside her fold in on itself, like a wing breaking. "You should believe me because I am a person," Ivy said, voice small. Ms. Danner finally looked at her. There was no softness there, only exhaustion and judgment. "You are suspended, effective immediately. Your guardian will be contacted." Ivy did not correct her. Ridgeview was not a guardian, it was a holding pen. When she walked back through the rain toward Ridgeview, the world felt blurred at the edges. Every sound was too sharp, every smell too bright. Her senses kept catching on things: the distant rumble of traffic, the hiss of water in gutters, a dog barking blocks away, a bird's wings cutting air. It was as if she had been living behind glass and someone had smashed it. At Ridgeview, Margaret Caldwell waited in her office. Caldwell always looked immaculate, even in a building that smelled faintly of bleach and old food. She wore her hair pinned back, lipstick precise, eyes watchful. She did not smile when Ivy entered. "Ivy," Caldwell said, folding her hands. "Sit." Ivy sat. "I received a call," Caldwell continued. "You assaulted a student." "He humiliated me," Ivy said. "He took my diary. He kissed me in front of everyone." Caldwell's eyes narrowed slightly, as if measuring how useful that information was rather than how painful. "And you responded by nearly mauling him," Caldwell said. Ivy flinched. Caldwell leaned back. "I have defended you for years. I have smoothed over incidents. I have explained your outbursts." Outbursts. The word made Ivy want to scream. "You did not defend me," Ivy said, voice trembling. "You kept me here." Caldwell's gaze sharpened. "Do you know how many prospective families you have frightened away?" Ivy stared at her. Memory slammed in, flashes of strangers visiting Ridgeview, smiling too hard, asking polite questions, then leaving. Ivy had always blamed herself. Now she saw Caldwell in those scenes, talking quietly with them, her hand on their arm, her expression grave. "You told them not to take me," Ivy whispered. Caldwell's jaw worked. For a moment, something almost like discomfort flickered. Then it was gone. "You were not safe to place," Caldwell said. "Not without understanding what you are." The room went very still. Ivy's heart hammered. "What I am?" Caldwell's eyes held hers. Unusual. The word was careful. It was a locked door. Ivy leaned forward. Tell me the truth. Caldwell did not answer directly. You are going on medical leave. You will see Dr. Adrian Parker. Ivy's stomach dropped. A psychologist. A specialist, Caldwell corrected. And you will be moved to a separate room, reduced contact, for your safety and others. Ivy's hands clenched. You are isolating me. Caldwell's voice was crisp. You are volatile. The anger rose again, hot and immediate. Ivy could feel it under her skin, prowling. Or you are afraid, Ivy said. Afraid I will find out what you did. Caldwell's expression froze. Enough, go pack. Staff will bring your meals. You will follow the rules. Ivy left the office with her vision swimming. Her new room was at the end of the hallway, an empty space that smelled like dust and abandonment. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded final. That night, Ivy lay on the narrow bed and listened. She could hear the entire building, the night staff whispering, a child crying softly in another room, pipes ticking, wind pushing rain against the windows, and beneath it all something else. A low hum, like a distant heartbeat that did not belong to the building. She pressed her palms to her ears and tried to shut the world out. When she finally slept, she dreamed again. She was running through snow, paws silent, breath steaming. Her body was huge and strong, fur-thick muscles rolling with each leap. The air was crisp and full of scents that told stories. Pine, blood, smoke. Ahead, firelight flickered between trees. A voice called her name, but it did not say Ivy. It said something older, something that made her chest ache with recognition. She woke with her heart racing and the taste of ash in her mouth. The next day, Brenda Reeves brought her breakfast on a tray and set it down as if feeding an animal that might bite. Brenda was a caregiver, the kind who liked power in small spaces. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Do not cause trouble, Brenda said. Ivy stared at her. I did not ask for any of this. Brenda snorted. Sure, kids like you always say that. You think the world owes you because you have a sad story. Ivy's hands curled around the edge of the blanket. She forced her voice to stay even. Leave. Brenda leaned in a fraction. Or what? You will scratch me too. The beast in Ivy stirred, offended. Ivy swallowed it down hard. Just go, Ivy said. Brenda left, but not before giving Ivy a look that said she would be watching, waiting for Ivy to prove she was exactly what they believed. Days passed. Ivy met with Dr. Parker in a small office that smelled of tea and paper. Dr. Adrian Parker was in his 30s, calm, dark-eyed, with the kind of controlled presence that made you feel like he noticed everything. He smiled politely, but it did not reach his eyes. He asked questions with careful gentleness, but Ivy could sense something behind it. Anticipation, like he was waiting for a certain answer. On the third visit, Ivy could not hold it in anymore. She leaned forward, voice shaking. Something is happening to me. I can hear things I should not hear. I can see in the dark. Sometimes I get so angry I feel like I am not human. Parker's pen paused. Ivy continued, words rushing now. And this pendant, she said, pulling it from beneath her shirt. It was a small lynx, metal and worn, something she had always had without knowing why. Its eyes glow sometimes. It is not normal. Parker looked at the pendant. For the first time, his composure shifted, not fear. Recognition. He set the pen down carefully. It is starting, he said. Ivy's breath caught. You know. Parker's gaze stayed on her face. Yes. The relief was so sharp it hurt, and it was immediately followed by betrayal. Then tell me. His jaw tightened. Not yet. Ivy blinked hard. Not yet, are you serious? Parker's voice remained calm, but there was steel under it. The truth will change your entire world. I need you stable before I give it to you. I am not stable now, Ivy hissed. I am trapped in a room like a criminal. Parker leaned forward slightly. I am trying to keep you alive. The words landed like a slap. Alive from what? Ivy stood abruptly, chair scraping. Her hands shook. You are like the rest of them, you know, and you keep me in the dark. Parker's eyes hardened, not angry but unyielding. Wait, Ivy. No, she said and left, slamming the door hard enough to make the frame rattle. The hallway felt too tight. She could hear her own blood rushing. She marched straight to Caldwell's office. Brenda tried to block her path. You are not allowed in there. Ivy shoved past her. Caldwell looked up, annoyed. What is this? Ivy slammed her hands on the desk. Tell me what I am. Caldwell's expression held. You are out of control. Ivy leaned in, voice low. You have kept me here. You have stopped families from taking me. You have watched me change and you did nothing. Why? For the first time, Caldwell's composure cracked just slightly. A sigh, small but heavy. I knew you were unusual the day you arrived, Caldwell said. Ivy's stomach dropped. How? Caldwell's eyes flicked to the door as if checking if anyone listened. You were brought here under instructions, very specific instructions from Dr. Parker. Ivy's vision narrowed. He did this. Caldwell's voice sharpened. He did it to save you. From what? Ivy demanded. Caldwell's mouth tightened. From people who would kill you if they knew what you were. The room spun. Ivy gripped the edge of the desk. Kill you. She had believed her life was small and cruel. She had not believed it was hunted. She backed away slowly. I cannot do this, she whispered. Caldwell's voice softened by a fraction, the closest she ever came to gentleness. Ivy, please follow the process. Let Parker handle it. Ivy turned and fled. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was cold and damp. She ended up in the small gazebo in the yard, the place she used to hide when Ridgeview felt too loud. Someone was already there. A girl with pale hair and a newness to her posture, as if she did not yet know the rules of surviving this place. She looked up when Ivy approached, eyes red-rimmed. I am sorry, the girl said quickly. I did not mean to steal your spot. Ivy shook her head. It is not mine. The girl hesitated. I am Lena. Ivy sat at the far end, leaving space between them like a safety line. Ivy, Lena's voice wavered. They said you got suspended. From school? Ivy's throat tightened. Yes. Lena picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. My family died in a crash, she said suddenly, words tumbling out as if she would choke on them if she held them in. I am here until I do not know, until someone decides what to do with me. Ivy stared at her hands. She did not know how to comfort people. Comfort had never been reliably given to her, so she did the only thing she knew. She pulled out her sketchbook and held it out, not to show off but to offer a distraction, a bridge. Lena leaned in, her eyes widened. You drew this. This is amazing. Ivy swallowed. It is just something I see. Lena traced the air above the lynx's face without touching the page. It looks like it is alive. Ivy felt her throat close, because that was exactly what it felt like, as if the animal on the page was not a drawing but a memory. Lena looked at Ivy carefully. Can we be friends? The word friends sounded unreal. Ivy's chest tightened, a strange ache of wanting and fear. I do not know if I am good at that, Ivy said. Lena gave a small, sad smile. Neither am I. We can be bad at it together. Ivy let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Okay, she said quietly. Together. That night, rumors ran through Ridgeview like mice in the walls. Dr. Parker was quitting. Dr. Parker was leaving town. Dr. Parker had argued with Caldwell. Dr. Parker had been reported. Ivy lay awake listening, heart tight. A part of her wanted him gone because he had lied by omission. Another part of her felt panic at the thought because he was the only person who had looked at her changes and called them real. On the fourth day, Ivy left her room after lights out, moving like a shadow down the hall. Her night vision made the corridor almost bright, every edge crisp. It should have frightened her more than it did. Instead, it felt inevitable, like she had always been meant to see in darkness. She reached Parker's office and found the door unlocked. Inside, the room was dim, lit by a single lamp. Dr. Parker stood by the desk, packing papers into a case. He looked up as if he had been expecting her. "Ivy," her throat tightened. "Are you leaving?" "Yes," he said simply. The word struck. "Then what happens to me?" Parker set the case down and faced her fully. His expression was controlled, but there was intensity under it that made Ivy's skin prickle. "I am taking you with me," he said. Ivy froze. "You cannot just take me." "I can," he replied, and something about his certainty was terrifying. Not because he sounded like a kidnapper, but because he sounded like a man who had already planned every step. Ivy's heart pounded. "Why?" He held her gaze. "Because Ridgeview was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to hide you until the time was right." Ivy's voice cracked. "Hide me from who?" Parker hesitated. The first crack in his control. "From a world that does not forgive your bloodline." Bloodline. The word was a key turning in a lock. "I do not understand," Ivy whispered. Parker exhaled slowly, like a man stepping into a storm. "There are parallel worlds," he said. "There is magic, and there are houses, families with power. You are one of them." Ivy's knees went weak. She gripped the back of a chair. Parker reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a flat stone carved with symbols. He placed it on the desk and spoke a word that did not sound like English. The symbols lit pale gold. The stone lifted into the air, hovering. Ivy stared, breath locked in her chest. Parker's voice was steady. "This is real, and so are the changes in you." The stone floated, then lowered gently back to the desk. Ivy's eyes burned. "What am I?" Parker's gaze softened for a heartbeat, a rare warmth breaking through his cold focus. "Your true name is Ivy Emberlynx," he said. "And you are heir to a house that was destroyed." Emberlynx. Her pendant warmed against her skin as if it heard its own name. Ivy's fingers trembled as she touched it. Parker continued, voice low. "Your mother was Dahlia Emberlynx. Your father was Victor Emberlynx. I loved your mother." The confession hit like a blow. Ivy swayed. He went on, words careful but heavy with memory. "A man named Corvin Blackthorn attacked. He slaughtered your house. I opened a portal and carried you out. You were a baby. You would have died." Ivy's vision blurred. "So my parents are dead." Parker's jaw tightened. "Yes." A sob rose, ugly and involuntary, and Ivy hated herself for it. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Parker's eyes stayed on her, hard and protective. "I am sorry," he said, and the words sounded like they cost him. Ivy swallowed, forcing herself to breathe. "Why now?" "Your 18th birthday is close," Parker said. "The block that kept your nature dormant is weakening. Your first full shift could happen soon. If it happens here, people could die, you could die." Shift. The lynx in her dreams moved closer, pressed against her skin from inside. Ivy whispered, "So I am a monster." Parker's voice snapped, sharp with something like anger. "No, you are a weapon that has not been taught how to hold itself safely. There is a difference." Ivy's stomach twisted. And you will teach me. Parker looked away for a moment, then back. Yes, but not here. He explained the plan quickly. Legal guardianship papers. A sham marriage between him and Margaret Caldwell for paperwork leverage. The words felt surreal, like a play being staged around her life. Ivy listened, numb. When she returned to her room, she packed without knowing what she chose. A few clothes, sketchbook, diary, pendant. She kept expecting someone to stop her, to tell her she was dreaming. But the night moved forward relentlessly. In the gazebo, as she waited for Parker's signal, Brenda Reeves appeared like a bitter ghost. "So it is true," Brenda said. "You have been sneaking around with the doctor." Ivy's stomach turned. "That is not what this is." Brenda's eyes glittered with mean satisfaction. "Sure, you think you are special, you think you are worth saving." Ivy's hands shook. "Move." Brenda stepped closer. "Maybe I should tell the police, or the papers, or maybe I should just tell everyone at Ridgeview that you are exactly what they all suspect. A nasty little." Ivy did not remember moving. She only remembered the moment the rage took over, hot and clean and terrifying. Her hand shot out and fisted in Brenda's hair. Brenda screamed. Ivy dragged her down the walkway, not caring about the gravel scraping skin, not caring about the sound of Brenda's panic. All Ivy felt was the beast's satisfaction, the certainty that the world should stop hurting her. Then Lena ran into the yard screaming Ivy's name, and behind her came Parker, moving fast. "Stop!" Parker commanded. His voice cut through the rage like ice water. Ivy froze mid-motion, breath ragged. Brenda sobbed, clawing at Ivy's grip. Parker stepped closer, eyes dark. "Let go." Ivy's fingers loosened slowly, shaking. Brenda collapsed, scrambling away like prey. Ivy stood there, horrified at herself, at how good it had felt. Parker's gaze flicked over her hands, then her face. "This is why we leave now," he said, voice low. Margaret Caldwell appeared at the edge of the light, face pale with fury. "Get her out," she hissed. "Tonight, before she does something we cannot hide." Ivy flinched at the word hide. Even now, she was something to conceal. Parker turned to Ivy. "Come." His tone was not gentle. It was command. It should have angered her. Instead, it steadied her, like his cold certainty gave her something solid to hold onto. She followed him. Parker's place was small and neat, nothing like Ridgeview. His office held books and old artifacts that made Ivy's skin prickle. He moved with efficient urgency. In front of a tall mirror, Parker drew symbols in the air with a piece of chalk that did not leave dust, only light. The air rippled. Ivy's heart hammered. "Where are we going?" "Etheria," Parker said. "A world where your house mattered, a world that wants you dead." The mirror shimmered, then opened like water. Ivy stared, seeing not her reflection but a corridor of darkness filled with faint stars. Her knees went weak. "I cannot," she whispered. Parker stepped close, his presence sudden and overwhelming. He was not tender, not soothing. He looked down at her as if daring her to survive. "You can," he said. Ivy's eyes burned. "Why do you care?" For a second, the cold mask slipped. Something grief-worn and fierce flashed in his eyes. "Because I failed your mother," he said quietly, "and I will not fail you." Then the cold returned, controlled and frightening. "Hold on to me. Do not let go." Ivy's body trembled as she reached for him. His hand closed around her wrist, firm, grounding, almost bruising. It made her feel small. It made her feel safe in a way she hated needing. They stepped through. The world twisted. Ivy's stomach lurched. Sound vanished. Pressure crushed her ribs, then released. She tried to breathe and tasted something sharp like lightning. Darkness swallowed her. When she woke, she was lying on a bed in a cottage that smelled of herbs and smoke. A fire crackled. Outside the window, snow drifted softly in a way that made the world feel unreal. Parker sat in a chair beside the bed, watching her as if he had not blinked since she fell. Her throat was dry. "Am I dead?" "No," he said. "Drink." He handed her a cup. The liquid tasted bitter, then warm, spreading through her like a slow flame. Her shaking eased. "What did you give me?" Ivy whispered. "A tonic," Parker replied. "Crossing takes a toll." Ivy stared at the ceiling, trying to process. "So this is Etheria." "Yes," Parker said. "Briarhaven, quiet for now." Ivy turned her head toward him. "What happens next?" Parker's gaze was steady. "You will attend Westridge Arcane Academy. You will learn discipline, combat, control. You will learn what it means to carry your name." Name, Emberlynx. Ivy's pendant warmed again. She touched it, then looked at her hands. They looked normal, but she knew how quickly that could change. "Do not lie to me anymore," she said. Parker's expression did not soften, but his voice lowered. "I will not lie," he said. "But I will not tell you everything at once. Some truths are blades. You need armor first." The next days moved like a dream with sharp edges. Parker took Ivy into the town, where people wore cloaks and carried charms openly, where a shopkeeper sold enchanted pens as casually as pencils. Ivy kept expecting someone to point at her and shout. Nobody did. That almost scared her more, as if danger here was quieter and smarter. They bought clothes, including a dark uniform with Westridge's crest. Ivy held it and felt the weight of belonging she did not trust. They bought textbooks, ingredients, a cauldron that looked too heavy until Parker lifted it with one hand and an amused look that said, "Do not question me." He took her to a small shop for a diary. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with bright eyes, offered Ivy a leather-bound book and murmured an enchantment. "Only the owner will see what is written," the woman said. Ivy's chest tightened. Privacy, safety. She wrote one line, "Ivy Emberlynx." The ink glowed briefly, then sank into the page as if drinking the name. Ivy swallowed hard. Next came the stylus, crafted to fit her hand. The top was shaped like a lynx head with amber eyes that seemed to watch her. When she touched it, warmth pulsed into her fingers, a bond settling like a quiet claim. On the morning they went to Westridge, Ivy's stomach twisted until she thought she might be sick. The academy rose from the snow like a fortress made elegant, stone towers and arched windows, banners snapping in cold wind. Students moved in groups, laughing, arguing, carrying weapons as casually as books. Magic shimmered in small ways around them, a spark on a fingertip, a rune hovering over a palm. Ivy felt both awe and terror. Everyone here looked like they belonged in a world with teeth. Ivy had spent her life learning to be small. Parker walked beside her, calm and purposeful, like he owned the ground under his boots. At the dorms, he handed her a key. "Private room," he said, "for safety." Ivy wanted to argue. She wanted to not be isolated again. But she also feared what she might do in sleep, in rage, in accident, so she nodded. Her neighbor introduced herself that evening. A girl with warm brown skin and sharp eyes, hair tied back, posture like someone ready to fight. She leaned in the doorway with confidence that felt like sunlight. "I am Nora Foxwood," the girl said. "You are new." Ivy hesitated. "Ivy?" Nora looked her up and down. "You look like you are waiting for someone to hit you." Ivy's face flushed. "I am not." Nora shrugged. "Good, because I do not share walls with fragile people. We keep each other alive here." Alive again, Ivy's stomach sank. That night in the main hall, the placement ceremony began. A stone bowl sat on a pedestal. One by one, students pricked their fingers and let blood drip into it. The blood flashed, then rose as smoke, forming shapes above their heads. When Nora's blood touched the bowl, fire erupted, swirling into a fox shape. The crowd cheered. Nora grinned like she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. Then Ivy stepped forward. The hall felt too large. Too many eyes. Her hearing caught whispers in the back, curious, sharp. Parker was there among the professors, but he did not look like Parker. He wore different clothes, his hair slightly altered, his presence colder, his face a mask. When Ivy's eyes met his, he gave the smallest nod, a silent order to proceed. Ivy pricked her finger. Blood welled bright. When it fell into the bowl, heat surged up her arm like a fuse lighting. The bowl flared. The air above it shimmered. For a moment, Ivy thought the truth would explode into the open, that a lynx would form in fire and everyone would see her and hunt her. Instead, a ring of fire rose, spinning, concealing whatever tried to form inside it. The fire was beautiful and wrong, like a curtain drawn too quickly. The Chancellor, an older man with silver hair and a voice that carried effortlessly, said smoothly, "Combat faculty." Cheers rose. The ceremony moved on. Ivy stood frozen, heart pounding. Afterward, in a shadowed corridor, Parker approached her in his professor guise. "Professor Ash Crow," he said quietly, for anyone listening. Then in a lower voice meant only for her, he added, "The Chancellor hid your beast for now." Ivy's mouth went dry. "So they know." Crow's gaze was hard. "Yes, and that is why you will do exactly as you are told." The first weeks were exhausting. History classes taught her the houses of the Dominion of Malvora, alliances, betrayals, wars that sounded like myths but were taught like facts. Poison's class made her hands steady and her stomach strong. Combat training bruised her arms and stripped away the last of her Ridgeview softness. She made 2 friends despite herself. Nora was loud, fearless, stubbornly loyal. She swore like it was an art form and laughed like she dared the world to challenge her. Caleb Pierce was different, gentle-eyed, quick to smile, but with power that snapped like lightning when it got loose. One day on the combat grounds, his magic surged out of control, cracking a training pillar in half. The professor's shout echoed, students diving back. Caleb stood pale, horrified, hands shaking. Ivy moved before she thought, stepping toward him, voice low. "Breathe," she told him. "Look at me, just look." Caleb's eyes locked on hers. His panic steadied slightly, like her presence gave him a point to anchor to. Later, he found her in the corridor. "Thanks," he said quietly. "Most people just stare." Ivy looked away. "I know what it is like," she admitted. Caleb studied her. "Do you?" "Because you look like you are carrying a storm." Ivy did not answer. She did not know how to explain that the storm had claws. She also made an enemy. Selene Frost moved through the academy like she expected doors to open for her. Pale hair, perfect posture, smile that never reached her eyes. She traveled with 2 girls who laughed at her jokes too quickly. When Selene looked at Ivy, it was not curiosity. It was appraisal, like Ivy was a potential nuisance that needed to be placed back in her proper container. In the library, Selene's gaze slid over Ivy's uniform, then up to Ivy's face. "You are the new combat placement," Selene said, voice smooth. Ivy kept her eyes on her book. "Yes." Selene leaned closer, perfume cold and sharp. "Try not to embarrass yourself. Combat is not for strays." Ivy's jaw tightened. She forced her hands to remain still. Caleb appeared at Ivy's side like he had been summoned by tension. "Leave her alone," he said, voice calm but firm. Selene's smile sharpened. "How noble," she murmured and walked away. That night, Ivy drew to calm herself. She found her pencil moving without permission again, sketching a boy's face she had only seen once across the hall. An upperclassman, tall, dark hair falling across his forehead, eyes like smoke. His presence had struck Ivy in the chest like a warning. Rowan Vale. She had seen him from a distance and felt something twist inside her, not soft, not sweet. It felt like recognition mixed with fear, like standing at the edge of a cliff and wanting to jump. Nora caught her sketchbook when Ivy was not paying attention. "Oh," Nora said slowly. "Who is that?" Ivy snatched it back. "Nobody." Nora's eyebrow rose. "Nobody does not look like that. That is Rowan Vale." Ivy's face heated. "How do you know?" Nora made a face. "Because everyone knows he is trouble. And he is engaged in the political sense to Selene Frost. Do not stare at him unless you want her to cut your throat." Ivy's stomach twisted. She told herself she did not care. But the next day, Ivy saw Rowan in the corridor. He walked with lazy control, hands in pockets as if the Academy's rules were suggestions for lesser people. Students moved slightly out of his path without thinking. He did not push them. He simply existed like a cold gravity. When his eyes met Ivy's, she froze. His gaze was not friendly. It was assessing, sharp, too aware. Ivy felt suddenly exposed, like he could smell what she was beneath skin. Rowan's mouth curved barely, not a smile. A hint of possession or threat. Then he kept walking. Ivy exhaled only when he was gone. That night she dreamed of shadow. A lynx made of darkness prowled through a ruined hall. Amber fire flickered far away, calling to it. The shadow lynx turned its head, and in its eyes she saw Rowan's gaze. She woke gasping, skin damp with sweat. Mid-semester, Professor Crow took Ivy away from class on her 18th birthday without explanation. He led her through an iron gate into an old cemetery on a hill. Snow fell softly, muffling sound. Ivy's breath formed clouds. Crow stopped in front of a headstone. Victor Emberlynx and Dahlia Emberlynx. Ivy's legs went weak. She sank to her knees in the snow, fingers shaking as she touched the carved letters. The stone was cold enough to burn. "They were real," she whispered. It felt like the world finally admitting a truth her bones had always known. Crow stood behind her, silent, letting the moment tear through her. Ivy pressed her forehead to the stone. The grief that had lived in her as a constant ache surged up into sharp pain. She did not sob loudly. She could not. The sound stuck in her throat, strangled by years of learning not to ask for comfort. Crow spoke quietly. "The Emberlynx house had a life well, a heart well. It sustained your people. Without it, your blood weakens over generations." Ivy lifted her head, eyes burning. "So I am fading." "You are not fading," Crow said. "You are awakening, but you will need the heart well restored." Ivy stared at the names again. A sense of purpose threaded through the grief, dangerous because it felt like hope. On the way back to campus, Ivy saw a patrol on the road, cloaked riders moving with disciplined menace. One turned his head. Under the hood, eyes glinted in the winter light. Ivy's pendant went hot against her skin. Crow's hand closed around her elbow, firm. "Do not stare," he murmured. Ivy's voice was barely a breath. "Who are they?" Crow's expression tightened. "Blackthorn." The name slammed into her like a memory she did not own. Fear rose, old and instinctive. As the patrol passed, one of the riders smiled slightly, as if he knew she was there. That night, Nora and Caleb forced a small celebration on Ivy, smuggling sweets, and a cheap bottle of something that tasted like berries and regret. They sang badly. They laughed. For a little while, Ivy forgot to be hunted. When the night ended and Ivy returned to her room, she found a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a photograph, old and slightly faded. A woman with dark hair and a smile that made Ivy's chest ache. Her eyes were bright, alive, familiar in a way that made Ivy's throat close. Dahlia. Ivy stared until her vision blurred. She pressed the photo to her chest like it might fill the hollow place inside her. A note in Crow's precise handwriting lay beneath it. For when the emptiness gets loud, Ivy's lips trembled. She hated how much she needed that small kindness. The days grew colder. Selene left for field practice for a while, and the academy's tension eased. Ivy threw herself into training, partly to distract herself, partly because she could feel something in her building like pressure behind a dam. One afternoon, she stayed on the combat grounds alone, repeating hand forms until her arms shook. Snow drifted lightly. Her breath came hard. A shadow moved near the edge of the field. Rowan Vale stepped into view. Ivy's stomach flipped. She straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. "What are you doing here?" Rowan's gaze flicked over her stance, her bruised knuckles. "You are doing that wrong," he said. His voice was low, cool, with the kind of authority that did not ask permission. Ivy bristled. "And you came to tell me." Rowan moved closer, slow and controlled. "I came because watching you do it wrong is irritating." Ivy's pulse hammered. His presence made her hyper-aware of her own body, not in a flattering way, but in a vulnerable way, like she was a small animal near a predator, and her instincts could not decide whether to run or submit. Rowan stopped within arm's reach. "Hands," he said. "I can fix it myself," Ivy snapped. Rowan's eyes darkened. "You can try." The challenge in his tone sent heat through her. Anger, fear, something else. He reached out without asking and adjusted her wrist, his fingers firm. The touch was not gentle. It was precise, controlling. Ivy's breath caught. Rowan's mouth was close enough that she could feel his words as much as hear them. "You fight like you are afraid to take up space," he murmured. "Stop apologizing with your body." Ivy swallowed. "You do not know me." Rowan's gaze held hers, cold and heavy. "I know you are not what you pretend." The sentence made her blood turn to ice. Ivy stepped back hard, trying to break the moment. "Leave me alone." Rowan watched her, then tilted his head slightly. "You smell like fire," he said quietly. Ivy's vision narrowed. "What did you say?" Rowan's lips curved faintly. "Nothing you can use against me, not yet. Not yet." The words felt like fingers closing around her throat. Rowan stepped back, as if satisfied with the damage he had done. "Do your forms again," he said, "and do not collapse, it would be inconvenient." Then he turned and walked away. Ivy stood shaking, furious, and disoriented. Her body felt too tight. Her skin hummed. She hated him for making her feel small. She hated herself for wanting him to look back. That night, in a mixed sparring session, Ivy was paired against an upperclassman. Against Rowan, the field went quiet in a way that made Ivy's spine prickle. Selene had returned to campus that day, her gaze cutting toward the pairing with sharp interest. Nora swore under her breath. Rowan stepped onto the mat with lazy confidence. He looked at Ivy like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. The professor overseeing the match called for ready. Ivy raised her guard, trying to steady her breath. Her senses sharpened. She could hear Rowan's heartbeat. Slow. Controlled. It made her feel like prey again. Rowan moved first. He did not rush. He advanced like winter, inevitable. He feinted left, then struck right. Ivy blocked, but the impact jolted her arm. His strength was unfair. His control was worse. Ivy countered with a kick. Rowan caught her ankle with one hand and twisted just enough to throw her off balance. Ivy fell hard, breath knocked out. Rowan crouched beside her, voice low so only she could hear. "Get up," he said. "Do not embarrass yourself." Ivy's face burned. She scrambled up, rage heating her blood. She attacked. For a moment, she forgot fear and let the fire inside her surge into movement. Her strikes came faster, sharper. Rowan's eyes narrowed with interest. He blocked, stepped in, and grabbed her wrist mid-strike. His grip was iron. Ivy tried to yank free. He did not let her. He leaned in, voice like a threat wrapped in silk. "There you are," he murmured. The words hit her with a sick thrill. Ivy's control cracked. For a second, her nails sharpened. She felt the claws wanting to emerge. Rowan's gaze flicked to her fingers. His expression changed just slightly. The professor shouted, "Enough! Break!" Rowan released Ivy instantly, face smoothing back into indifference. Ivy stood trembling, staring at her own hand until the claws receded. Nobody else seemed to have seen, or maybe they had and were pretending not to. After the session, Rowan followed Ivy out into the cold corridor. "Ivy," he said. She kept walking. "Do not." Rowan's footsteps stayed with hers unhurried. "Walk with me," he said. It was not a request, it was command. The tone made her stomach knot. Ivy stopped and turned, anger flaring. "Why, so you can threaten me in private?" Rowan's eyes were unreadable. "I do not waste threats." The calm certainty of that statement chilled her. Ivy's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Then what do you want?" Rowan held her gaze for a long moment. Then he said, to talk. Ivy should have refused. But something inside her was tired of running from every sharp thing, and Rowan was sharp in a way that made her feel alive. "Fine," she said. They walked along a path behind the academy where snow lay untouched and the wind cut clean. Ivy kept her arms wrapped around herself. Rowan walked close enough that his body heat brushed her through the air, but he did not touch her. That distance felt deliberate, like restraint. After several minutes, he spoke. "Selene thinks she owns me." Ivy's throat tightened. "Does she?" Rowan's laugh was soft and humorless. "No, there is nothing real between us. It is arrangement, house politics." Ivy stared ahead. "Then why does she act like she hates me?" Rowan glanced at her. "Because she sees you looking at me." Ivy's face flamed. "I do not." Rowan stopped walking. Ivy stopped too, forced by the sudden weight of his attention. He stepped closer. The world narrowed to his shadow and the sound of her own blood. "Do not lie," Rowan said quietly. His voice was cold, but beneath it something darker moved, a hunger that frightened her more because it made her want to stay. Ivy's hands shook. "What do you want from me?" Rowan's gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. For a heartbeat, something almost gentle flickered there, so brief she wondered if she imagined it. "I want to know what you are," he said. Ivy's stomach dropped. "I am nobody." Rowan's mouth curved, faint and cruel. "Nobody does not smell like fire." Ivy backed away. "This is a mistake." Rowan watched her with a stillness that felt predatory. "Yes," he agreed, "and you will make it anyway." He turned and walked back toward the academy, leaving Ivy shaking in the snow. The weeks rushed toward midwinter, the gala that everyone pretended was just a dance and everyone knew was a market for alliances. Nora and Ivy went into Briarhaven to find dresses, with Caleb trailing behind, pretending not to mind the shopping. Ivy chose a dark red dress that made her feel like a stranger wearing someone else's skin. Nora chose gold, laughing and spinning in the shop mirror. Caleb promised to teach Ivy to dance. They practiced on the grounds at dusk, stumbling and laughing until Ivy's ribs ached with a rare lightness. Then Rowan appeared. He watched for a moment from the shadows, then stepped into the light as if the world owed him space. Caleb stiffened. Nora muttered, "Of course." Rowan's gaze fixed on Ivy. "You are doing it wrong," he said again. Ivy's face heated. "It is just a dance." Rowan walked up and held out his hand. "Then learn properly." Ivy stared at his hand like it was a trap. It probably was. Caleb stepped forward. "She is fine." Rowan did not look at Caleb. "I did not ask you." The dismissal was so cold it made Ivy's stomach twist. Nora's eyes narrowed. "You think you can just take her?" Rowan finally glanced at Nora, and his expression did not change, but the air felt heavier, like his attention carried threat. "If I wanted to take her," he said calmly, "you would not be able to stop me." Silence fell. Ivy's heart hammered. Fear flared, but also a sick pull toward him, toward that dangerous certainty. Rowan looked back at Ivy. His voice lowered. "Do you want to learn or not?" Ivy hated that her answer mattered. She hated that it made her feel chosen. She placed her hand in his. Rowan's fingers closed around hers firm. He stepped in, pulling her into position with controlled dominance. Ivy's breath caught at the closeness. "Do not fight me," Rowan murmured. "Follow." His hand at her waist was steady, not gentle. It told her exactly where to be. Ivy felt exposed, like he could move her anywhere and she would have no defense. And yet, when he guided her, the steps became easy. Her body understood his command in a way that scared her. Rowan leaned in slightly, voice barely audible. "See, you can stop resisting." Ivy swallowed. "I am not resisting." Rowan's mouth brushed near her ear without touching. "You are always resisting," he said, "even when you want something." Ivy's throat tightened. For the first time, Rowan's grip softened for a heartbeat, like a brief accidental tenderness. His thumb stroked her knuckle once. The small gentleness shattered her more than his coldness ever had. Then he released her as if nothing had happened and walked away. Midwinter Gala arrived. The hall glittered with enchanted lights and winter roses that never wilted. Music swelled, rich and sweet. Students wore finery, masks of charm and ambition. Professors watched from the edges like judges. Ivy entered with Nora and Caleb trying to breathe. Her dress felt too tight. Her pendant felt too hot. Selene Frost stood near the center, flawless, surrounded by admirers. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for Rowan. Rowan did not appear. Ivy tried to tell herself she was relieved. She tried to focus on Nora's jokes, Caleb's awkward compliments. But she kept feeling the space where Rowan should have been, like a missing tooth. Time passed. The dance floor filled, couples spinning. Ivy watched, half present, her senses stretched thin. She could hear too much. Laughter, whispered negotiations, jealousy disguised as praise. Then the air shifted. A cold awareness ran over Ivy's skin like a hand. She turned. Rowan stood at the edge of the hall, half in shadow, watching her. He looked like he had stepped out of night itself. His face was calm, but his eyes were intense, fixed on Ivy with a focus that made her breath catch. Selene noticed him too, her posture straightened, possessive. Rowan did not look at Selene. He walked straight toward Ivy. The room seemed to part unconsciously, people stepping aside without realizing why. Ivy stood frozen, heart pounding. Nora's fingers tightened around Ivy's hand. Rowan stopped in front of Ivy. He held out his hand. "Ivy," he said quietly, "dance with me." Nora hissed, "Do not." Caleb looked tense, ready to intervene. Ivy's mouth went dry. She looked at Rowan's hand. The memory of his control, his coldness, his brief tenderness, the fear, the desire. Selene began moving toward them, expression tight with fury. Rowan's eyes stayed on Ivy. "Now," he said. Ivy's body moved before her mind decided. She placed her hand in his. Rowan's grip closed firm. He pulled her onto the dance floor with effortless authority. Selene stopped short, face pale with contained rage. Music swelled around them. Rowan placed a hand at Ivy's waist, drew her close. Ivy's breath caught. She could feel his strength, his stillness, the controlled violence under his skin. It made her feel fragile. "Why are you doing this?" Ivy whispered. Rowan's voice was low. "Because I want to," Ivy swallowed. "And what you want is always what happens." Rowan's gaze sharpened. "If you want me to stop, say it." The offer sounded like a lie, but it was there. Ivy could not speak. Her body betrayed her, leaning into him. Rowan's mouth curved faintly, not kind, satisfied. He guided her through the dance. The room blurred. Ivy's senses narrowed to his hand, his breath, the way his eyes never left hers. "You are shaking," Rowan murmured. "I am fine," Ivy lied. Rowan's grip tightened slightly. "You are not fine," he said. "You are on the edge of something." Ivy's throat tightened. "You do not know what you are playing with." Rowan's voice lowered further. "I do." Then, with a deliberate calm that felt like a sentence, Rowan leaned in and kissed her. Not like Miles, not like a performance designed to humiliate. This kiss was still a claim, a possession, a dangerous choice made in front of everyone. Ivy felt the room explode into shocked whispers. She heard Nora gasp, heard Caleb curse softly, but the louder sound was inside Ivy. Heat erupted through her veins. Her pendant blazed against her chest. Her vision flared amber at the edges. Pain lanced through her spine like fire trying to reshape bone. Rowan pulled back slightly, eyes widening as he felt it too, the shift in the air. The hall's enchanted lights flickered, shadows thickened. A low rumble vibrated through the floor, like an animal growl rising from the building itself. Students stepped back, fear cutting through glamour. Above the dance floor, magic manifested. A spectral lynx of ember and flame formed in the air, enormous, eyes burning amber. And beside it, a lynx of shadow, darker than darkness, eyes like cold smoke. Gasps rippled through the hall. Ivy's body convulsed. She clutched Rowan's shirt not for intimacy, but for survival. Her bones felt like they were breaking and reforming. Her skin burned from the inside. Rowan caught her, arms tightening around her, voice suddenly fierce. "Look at me," he ordered. "Stay with me." Ivy tried. She tried to hold his gaze, to hold onto human shape. But the beast inside her surged, not as an intruder, but as a rightful owner reclaiming its home. Ivy screamed, the sound tearing out of her as her control shattered. The world tilted into fire and fur and pain. And as the first true shift began to take her in the middle of the glittering hall, Ivy saw Selene Frost watching with cold satisfaction. Selene's lips moved silently, shaping a word Ivy could not hear over her own scream. Emberlynx. The name fell into the air like blood and water. The scream that tore out of Ivy did not sound human for long. It started as pain, pure and helpless, then turned into something older. Something that did not ask for permission. Heat ripped through her spine, down her arms, along her ribs, as if fire had found bones and decided to remake them. She clutched Rowan's shirt because if she let go she would fall, and if she fell she might not get back up as Ivy at all. Rowan's arms locked around her hard enough to bruise his body a cold anchor against her burning. His voice hit her like a command meant for soldiers, not girls in dresses. "Look at me, stay with me." She tried. She tried so hard her eyes watered, but the hall was flickering. The enchanted light stuttered, the music warped, the air thickened with panic and magic. Above the dance floor, the spectral lynxes circled, ember and shadow, their forms made of power and prophecy. The ember one was hers. She knew it the way she knew her own pulse. The shadow one felt like Rowan, and that terrified her because it meant the danger was not just inside her. She tasted smoke. Her hands spasmed, nails lengthened, the seam of her sleeve split. The guests were no longer elegant students and future diplomats, they were scent and movement and fear. Her hearing sharpened until she could pick out individual breaths, the wet click of someone swallowing, the tremor in a whispered prayer. "Ivy," Nora shouted, and the sound cut through the roaring in Ivy's skull for half a second. "Ivy, fight it," as if it was an enemy, as if it was not the first thing in her life that felt like truth. Rowan shifted his stance, widening his feet as if preparing for impact. His jaw was clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. He looked calm only because he had learned to wear calm like armor. "I said stay," he repeated, lower now, almost intimate, and that closeness made Ivy's chest ache even as terror rose. "Do not make me hold you down." Hold you down. The words should have revolted her. Instead, they steadied her, because he sounded like someone who would, and somehow that certainty meant she was not alone in this. The floor beneath them trembled. Selene Frost stepped forward through the shrinking circle of onlookers as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. Her dress was pale, almost silver, and in the flickering light she looked like an icicle given a human face. Her eyes were fixed on Ivy with a bright, hungry focus. "You finally show it," Selene said, voice clear enough to carry. "The little stray finally shows her teeth." Ivy tried to speak, but a growl rumbled up instead. Selene lifted her hand. Frost bloomed in the air, a spray of pale shards that caught the light like diamonds. The temperature dropped so sharply that breath became clouds all around the circle. A professor shouted, "Stop! Stand down!" Selene did not even glance their way. Her gaze stayed on Ivy. "You think you can take what is mine," Selene continued. "In my hall, in front of everyone." Rowan's head snapped towards Selene, and the look he gave her was so cold it seemed to steal warmth from the air. "She is not yours," he said. Selene's smile sharpened. "Then whose is she?" Rowan did not answer. His arms tightened once around Ivy, not gentle, not comforting, but protective in the way a barricade protects you from a flood. Ivy's body convulsed again. Pain ripped through her hips, her shoulders. Her bones felt like they were liquefying, reshaping. She cried out, and this time the sound turned into a snarl. The Emberlynx above them dipped lower as if drawn by her. Its eyes flared brighter. The shadow lynx answered, circling tighter, and the air between them crackled like a storm about to break. Selene flicked her wrist. The frost shards shot forward. Rowan moved. He shifted Ivy behind him with a single hard pull, as if she weighed nothing, and thrust his palm out. Shadow unfurled from his hand, a ribbon of darkness that swallowed the ice midair. The frost hissed, then vanished into black as if it had never existed. Gasps rippled through the hall. Ivy saw the truth in that motion through the haze of pain. Rowan was not just a dangerous boy with a reputation. He was something made for war. Selene's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "So it is true," she said softly, as if to herself. A shadow lynx protecting an ember lynx. Rowan's voice dropped into something lethal. Walk away. Selene laughed, a small bright sound that did not match the fear edging around the room. Or what? You will bare your fangs for her again. Ivy could not stay behind him. The beast inside her surged toward the threat. She stumbled forward, dragging herself around Rowan's shoulder. Ivy, Rowan snapped, and the sound of her name from his mouth hit her harder than any spell. It was not tender. It was possession and warning at once. Selene's gaze locked on Ivy. Shift, she whispered, and the word felt like a blade sliding into a wound. Ivy's world went white hot. Fur erupted along her arms, her dress tore. Her spine arched with the violent relief of surrender. For a fraction of a second, she saw her own hands transform into paws, claws curved and gleaming like obsidian dipped in firelight. Then the ballroom was too small. Heat blasted outward. People screamed and scattered. Tables overturned. The enchanted lights shattered and rained sparks. Ivy felt herself expand, muscles swelling, bones thickening, fur igniting into ember gold. Her mind split, half human terror, half animal certainty. She landed on 4 paws with a weight that shook the floor. A giant lynx stood where a girl had been. Her breath came out as smoke and sparks. Her eyes burned amber. Her ears flattened back as she took in the chaos, the sense, the fear. It struck her with an almost sick clarity that she could kill everyone in this hall in seconds. Rowan stood before her, impossibly calm for someone facing a living inferno. His eyes were dark, his posture steady. He looked up at her and did not flinch. Easy, he said, and his voice was quieter now. Easy, Sparky, Sparky. The nickname should not have existed in this moment, yet it did. It hooked into something inside Ivy that was still Ivy, still listening. Selene's magic flared again, ice crawling up the floor like a living thing. It reached for Ivy's paws. Ivy roared. The sound shook banners from the walls. Students fell backward. Glass shattered. Selene lifted her chin, defiant. Do it, she taunted, and her eyes glittered with the thrill of danger. Prove what you are. Ivy lunged. Rowan moved with her, not in her way, but alongside, shadow flowing around him like a second skin. He did not stop Ivy from attacking Selene. He angled her, guided the momentum with a precision that made Ivy's beast respond despite itself. The first swipe of Ivy's paw shattered the ice, sending shards flying. Selene dodged backward, her heels skidding. Her face flashed with real fear for the first time. Then Professors hit the floor. A barrier of runes slammed down between Ivy and Selene, bright and humming. Ivy crashed into it, snarling, claws scraping sparks from the invisible wall. Containment, a voice thundered. The Chancellor stepped forward, silver hair shining in the broken light, his hands lifted. His eyes fixed on Ivy with a calm that belonged to a man who had stared down monsters before. Ivy Emberlynx, he said, and the way he spoke her name was not accusation. It was acknowledgement. You will not kill anyone tonight. Hearing her true name out loud in front of everyone made Ivy's human mind scream inside the beast. Exposure, death, hunt. The Chancellor's runes tightened, not crushing, but holding. Professor Crow appeared at the Chancellor's side like a shadow given bones. His gaze flicked to Rowan for a fraction of a second, sharp, warning, then back to Ivy. Breathe, Crow ordered, and his voice cut through the animal roar like a blade of ice. Find the human, hold her, hold her. As if Ivy could reach into herself and grip her own mind. She tried. She fought her own instincts, clawing back toward the memory of being a girl with bruised knuckles and a cracked heart. For a moment, she found it. For a moment, she felt her own fear again, clean and painful. The ember lynx above the hall dipped closer, then slowly faded, dissolving into sparks. The shadow lynx followed, retreating into darkness. The containment runes began to pulse softer. Ivy's massive body trembled. Her fur dimmed from flame to warm gold. Her paws dug grooves into the floor as she fought the urge to attack again. Selene's voice sliced through the tension. "You see," she called to the crowd. "You see what she is." "Enough," the Chancellor snapped, and the force behind the single word made Selene's mouth shut like a door. Two healers rushed to Selene, checking her for frost backlash, for fractures. Selene's eyes remained fixed on Ivy with a cold, triumphant satisfaction that made Ivy want to lunge again. Rowan took one step forward, as if ready to put himself between Selene and Ivy even with the barrier in place. Crow's gaze flashed to him again, warning sharpened into threat, and Rowan stopped. His jaw clenched, but he obeyed. Ivy's shift broke in reverse violently. Pain ripped again, bones shrinking, fur withdrawing, heat collapsing into fragile human skin. She collapsed onto the ruined dance floor, naked under torn fabric, shaking so hard she could barely breathe. Nora threw her cloak over Ivy without hesitation, hands trembling but determined. Caleb crouched beside them, face pale, eyes wide with fear and loyalty. "Ivy," Caleb whispered. "Ivy, look at me." Ivy's eyes struggled to focus. The world felt too bright, too loud. Her skin was hypersensitive, every draft like a knife. "I did not want to," she managed, voice shredded. "I did not want to." Nora swallowed hard. "I know," she said, but her voice shook because knowing and seeing were different. Healers lifted Ivy carefully. She expected Rowan to appear, to grab her, to command her to stay conscious, but he was gone. She caught a glimpse of him near the edge of the hall, face tight, eyes fixed on her with something like fear and something like longing. Then his gaze flicked to the professors, to the watching crowd, to Selene's smile. He turned and left. The door shut behind him. The sound hit Ivy like abandonment. In the infirmary, they laid her on a bed that smelled of clean linen and herbs. Potions burned down her throat. A healer murmured that her heart was racing, that her magic channels were inflamed, that first shifts were always brutal. Always, like it was normal, like she had not just become a monster in front of the entire academy. Professor Crow stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded, face unreadable. The Chancellor stood beside him, hands clasped behind his back, calm as a statue. Ivy hated them both for their calm. She hated herself more. Nora and Caleb were forced out at first, then allowed back in once Ivy's trembling eased. The healer finally left them with strict orders not to push Ivy, not to ask too much, not to trigger her again. Silence settled, heavy and full of words nobody wanted to speak. Nora broke it. "Tell us," she said, voice low. "Tell us the truth, all of it." Ivy stared at the ceiling. Her throat tightened until it hurt. Every instinct told her to lie, to shrink, to protect herself with distance. But she saw Nora's hands shaking. She saw Caleb's face tight with worry, his eyes refusing to look away. They had seen her become something out of nightmare, and they were still here. She swallowed. "My name is Ivy Emberlynx," she said, "and I am a shapeshifter, a lynxskin. My house was destroyed. I was hidden in another world." Caleb's lips parted. "Hidden from who?" Ivy closed her eyes. "From Blackthorn." Nora's face tightened. "The riders you saw." Ivy nodded once. Caleb exhaled, shaky. "So that is why you always look like you are listening for something." Ivy's eyes stung. "I always have been." Nora took a careful step closer. What about Rowan? She asked. Why did his magic show like that? Ivy's stomach clenched, Rowan's hand on her waist, his mouth on hers, the way he had said, "Stay with me." I do not know, Ivy admitted. But he is dangerous, not just because he is strong, because he looked at me like he already decided something. Caleb's voice turned bitter. He kissed you in front of everyone. That is not deciding something. That is declaring. Ivy flinched because it was true. Nora's gaze softened, then hardened again. Did you want him too? The question pierced straight through Ivy's defenses. She whispered, yes, and hate rose in her because she was still weak for wanting a boy who felt like winter and knives. Nora nodded slowly, as if accepting the ugliness of it without judgment. Okay, she said, then we deal with it. Together. Ivy swallowed against the burn in her throat. Together. The word felt like something she had never earned but was being given anyway. When Crow returned later that night, he did not ask how she felt. He did not offer comfort. He sat in a chair by her bed like a guard. The rumor has already moved beyond these walls, he said. An Emberlynx appeared at midwinter. People talk. People fear. People hunt. Ivy's hands curled under the blanket. So I am doomed. Crow's eyes narrowed. No. You are exposed, there is a difference. She turned her head toward him. Rowan ran. Crow's expression did not change, but something sharpened in his gaze. He did, he said, and he will come back when it suits him. Do not let your heart turn that into hope. Hope makes you careless. Ivy swallowed hard. You sound like you hate him. Crow's voice stayed calm. I do not hate him. I do not trust him. Ivy wanted to argue. She wanted to defend Rowan, and the impulse disgusted her because what exactly was she defending? A kiss that triggered her transformation. A boy engaged to her enemy. A predator who had offered her control and then disappeared. Crow leaned forward slightly. Sleep. Tomorrow you begin training that will keep you alive. When he stood to leave, Ivy said, Why did the Chancellor say my name? Crow paused. Then, quietly, he replied, Because you are not just a student, you are a symbol, and symbols draw blood. The next days blurred. Ivy moved through the academy under a new kind of gaze, not casual curiosity, not teenage gossip, something heavier, watchful, afraid. People stepped aside when she walked past. Some stared. Some avoided her like illness. A few looked at her with something like reverence, and that frightened her most of all. Selene was taken home under the excuse of recovery. The infirmary whispered that her frost magic had backlashed, that her channels were strained. Ivy did not believe Selene was weakened for long. Selene's strength was not just magic, it was cruelty wrapped in polish. Rowan did not appear. Nora tried to distract Ivy with small, normal things. Caleb brought notes and shared meals. Ivy pretended to eat and mostly failed. Her body was still recovering, hunger mixed with nausea, exhaustion mixed with restlessness. At night, she dreamed of running through snow and waking with the taste of iron. One afternoon, Ivy found Selene waiting outside the combat hall, posture perfect, expression calm. Ivy's stomach dropped. You are back. Selene's smile was smooth. I am, she said, and you are still here, how brave. Ivy kept her hands open at her sides, deliberately relaxed. What do you want? Selene stepped closer until Ivy could smell her perfume, sharp and cold. I want you to understand your place, Selene said softly. You are a problem, a threat. And you are standing too close to something that belongs to me. Ivy's jaw tightened. Rowan does not belong to you. Selene's eyes glittered. He belongs to the Vale name, and the Vale name is knotted into mine. Politics does not care about your feelings. Ivy's throat tightened. Then why do you care that he kissed me? Selene's smile thinned. Because he chose to do it, she said. He chose to do it in front of witnesses, and that means you are leverage. Ivy's blood turned cold. Leverage for what? Selene leaned in slightly, voice low. For Blackthorn, she whispered. For Vale, for anyone who wants the Emberlynx heir as a trophy or a corpse. Ivy forced herself not to flinch. Selene watched her carefully, enjoying the effort it took Ivy to hold still. Here is what will happen, Selene continued. You will stay away from Rowan. You will not speak to him. You will not look at him like you belong near him. If you do, I will send a message to Blackthorn lands. A simple truth. Ivy Emberlynx lives. Ivy's hands trembled. She hated that fear, hated how it made her feel small again, like Ridgeview, like being trapped by people who held power and called it care. If you do that, Ivy said, voice shaking with anger, you will kill me. Selene's expression stayed serene. Yes, she said, so make wise choices. She turned and walked away as if she had simply given fashion advice. Ivy stood frozen, the hallway spinning slightly. She could hear her own pulse, loud and fast, like an animal trapped in a cage. That night, Crow and the Chancellor met Ivy in a private room lined with warding sigils. The Academy cannot hide you anymore, the Chancellor said. Not fully. The Dominion has ears. Blackthorn has hunters. And there are those who still remember the Emberlynx and what your house meant. Ivy's voice came out thin. What did it mean? Crow answered before the Chancellor could. It meant balance, he said. It meant a life well that fed the land. It meant power that did not rot into tyranny. That is why they burned it. Ivy swallowed. So what now? The Chancellor's gaze held hers. We restore your heart well. The words hit Ivy with a strange pull. Restore, bring back, fix. She almost laughed at the childish hope in it. Crow continued, voice flat. You train every day. You learn to shift without losing your mind. You learn to fight without becoming cruelty. And when your body can hold what you are, we take you to the heart well. Ivy's hands clenched. And Rowan, Crow's eyes narrowed. Rowan is not your priority. The answer should have soothed her. Instead, it made something twist in her chest because it confirmed what she already feared. Rowan had become a wound she kept pressing. Days became routine and pain. Crow pushed Ivy until her muscles shook and her magic burned raw. The Chancellor taught her containment, breathwork, focus, the slow, brutal discipline of making power obey. You are not your rage, the Chancellor told her once as Ivy stood panting on the combat grounds, hands trembling. But your rage is part of you. Treat it like an animal, feed it properly. Do not starve it or it will eat what it can. Crow was less gentle. Again, he said, when Ivy failed a controlled drill and sparks leapt from her palms. Again until your fear gets bored. Ivy hated him for being right. Fear did not leave. It simply got tired of winning and moved on. Break came. Students left for holidays. The halls thinned. Snow deepened around the towers. Rowan did not return after break began. Ivy tried not to notice. She tried to pretend she did not watch the doors, did not listen for his footsteps, did not feel her stomach drop every time someone taller than average passed in the corridor. Nora caught her staring once and said nothing, just bumped her shoulder gently as if to say, I see you and I am not leaving. Crow left the academy for a day, then returned with his face tighter than usual. Ivy noticed small cuts on his hands, as if from thorns or claws. Where were you? She asked before she could stop herself. Crow looked at her for a long moment, then said, confirming what I already knew. He did not elaborate. He never did, not until he had to. Then Rowan came back. It was late evening, the dining hall nearly empty, and Ivy was carrying a tray she did not want when a hush moved through the room. Not the kind of hush made by authority. The kind made by instinct. Ivy turned. Rowan stood in the doorway, coat dusted with snow, hair slightly longer than before, face drawn tight with exhaustion. For a second, Ivy felt relief so sharp it hurt, and then she saw the way he held his left side, the stiffness in his shoulders, the faint bruising along his jaw. Her relief turned to cold anger. Rowan's eyes found hers. He looked at her like he had been walking toward this moment for miles and now did not know what to do with it. Ivy set her tray down too hard. "What happened to you?" Rowan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Hello to you too, Sparky." The nickname should have warmed her. Instead, it made her eyes sting with fury. "Do not," she said, voice low. "Do not act like you did not vanish after you kissed me and turned my life into a spectacle." Rowan stepped closer, each movement careful. "I did not turn your life into anything," he said. "Your blood did. I only stopped you from killing half the hall." The truth of it stung because she remembered him shielding her, commanding her to stay, shadow swallowing Seleni's ice. "You ran," Ivy said. Rowan's gaze sharpened. "And you think I wanted to?" Ivy opened her mouth, then shut it, because she did not know. She did not know anything about him except the danger and the rare moments when he looked almost human. Rowan's breath came out slow. "Come," he said. Ivy's body reacted instantly, a familiar, vulnerable pull toward his command. She hated it. "No," she said. "If you have something to say it here." Rowan's eyes flicked around the room. There were students watching from corners, pretending not to. Ivy could hear their breathing. Rowan lowered his voice. "Not here." Something in his tone made Ivy's anger falter. It was still cold, still commanding, but there was strain under it, like he was holding himself together with wire. Ivy swallowed. "Fine." She walked with him, not beside him, but half a step behind, refusing to give him equality or surrender. The corridor was dim, lit by enchanted sconces. Their footsteps echoed. Rowan finally stopped near an empty classroom and leaned against the wall. The movement made him wince. He hit it quickly, but Ivy saw. "You are hurt," she said. Rowan's jaw clenched. "It is nothing." Ivy stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Show me." Rowan's gaze dropped to her, sharp and warning. "Do not order me." Ivy's hands trembled, not with fear this time, but with stubborn rage. "Then do not lie to me." For a long moment they stared at each other, both refusing to bend. Then Rowan exhaled and opened his coat slightly. There was bandaging beneath, already stained faintly red. When he shifted, Ivy saw more bruising along his ribs. Her stomach dropped. "Who did this?" Rowan's voice turned flat. "My brother." The words hit Ivy like a stone. "Ronan," she whispered. Rowan's eyes hardened. "Yes." Ivy's throat tightened. "Why?" Rowan's mouth curved in something ugly. "Because I am his," he said, and the bitterness in the single word made Ivy shiver. "Because Vale and Blackthorn are tied in ways you do not see. Because I did not behave." Ivy stared at him. "You were punished." Rowan did not answer, but silence was answer enough. A sick thought rose. "Because you kissed me." Rowan's gaze flicked to her mouth, then back to her eyes. "Among other things," he said. Ivy's skin prickled. "Other things," Rowan's voice lowered. "I told him no. I told him I would not help hunt you." Ivy's breath caught. Rowan watched her with a stillness that felt dangerous. "That is why he kept me," he said. "Not in chains. Chains are for animals. He kept me with blood and obedience." Ivy's hands curled. The beast inside her stirred, furious on Rowan's behalf in a way that confused her. She did not want to care. Caring made you weak. Caring made you bleed. "And now you are back," she said slowly. "So you escaped." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "I was released," he corrected. "On purpose." Cold crawled up Ivy's spine. "Why?" Rowan's mouth tightened. "Because he wants to see what I do. Because he wants to see if I lead him to you." Ivy took a step back, fear flashing. "Then get away from me." Rowan's gaze snapped, sharp with something like anger. "Too late," he said. "He already knows you are here. He already heard the rumors. The only question is how long until he decides to stop watching and start taking." Ivy's voice broke. "Then why come near me at all?" Rowan's eyes held hers. There was a long pause. Then, very quietly, he said, "Because I could not stay away." The confession landed like a wound. It was not romantic. It was terrifying. It meant he was reckless or bound or both. Ivy forced herself to speak. "You should go to the healers," Rowan scoffed. "I do not need." Ivy stepped close, close enough to smell him, cold air and iron and something faintly smoky that made her lynx instincts shift. "You will," she said, voice trembling with authority she did not feel. "If you collapse, I will not carry you." Rowan stared down at her. For a heartbeat, his expression softened, just slightly, as if her stubbornness pulled something tender out of him against his will. Then the cold returned. "Fine," he said. "Take me." The words made Ivy's cheeks heat because they sounded wrong, intimate in a way she did not want to acknowledge. But she turned and led him toward the infirmary, heart pounding, feeling his heavy presence behind her like a shadow that had decided to follow. The healers were not gentle with Rowan. They cut away old bandages, clicked their tongues, muttered about broken ribs and reopened wounds and exhaustion. Rowan sat through it with a face carved from stone, only his hands betraying him, fingers tightening when pain hit hard. Ivy stood nearby, helpless and furious. One healer glanced at her. "Is she your handler?" the healer asked Rowan dryly. Rowan's eyes flicked to Ivy. "No," he said. Ivy bristled anyway. Rowan added, quieter, "She is complicated." Ivy's stomach twisted. When the healer left, Rowan leaned back, eyes closed, face pale under bruises. Ivy stared at him, all her anger tangled with fear. "You invited me to your home," she said, remembering the words he had murmured after the gala when he finally found her in the corridor, calling her Sparky, asking to talk, promising protection and new years. She had believed him for half a second and hated herself for it. Rowan opened his eyes. "I did," he said. "And then you vanished," Ivy said. Rowan's gaze sharpened. "I did not vanish," he snapped. "I was taken." Ivy flinched. The beast in her hated that he could still scare her even when injured. Rowan's voice dropped, controlled again. "Listen to me," he said. "I cannot offer you safety the way you want it, not soft, not clean, but I can offer you this. If my house comes for you, they go through me first." Ivy's throat tightened. "Why?" Rowan's mouth twitched bitter. "Because my father built his power on blood," he said, "and I am tired of being part of it." Ivy whispered, "Your father." Rowan's eyes went distant for a moment. "He is not the worst of them," he said. "That is the problem." The next time Selene found Ivy, she did it with precision as if she had timed it for maximum damage. It was in the corridor outside the dining hall, students flowing around them. Selene's gaze flicked to Ivy's face, then to the direction of the infirmary. "So he came back," Selene said softly. "He always does." Ivy forced herself to keep walking. Selene matched her pace, smile calm. "Did he tell you what he is?" Selene asked. "Did he tell you what lives inside him?" Ivy's jaw tightened. Go away. Selene's voice turned velvet sharp. He is a shadow lynx, she murmured. A predator made of night, and you are ember, fire and shadow. You think that is romance, it is prophecy. Ivy stopped and turned, anger flaring. What do you want? Selene's eyes glittered. I want you afraid, she said simply. Because fear makes you obedient, remember our agreement. Ivy's hands trembled. If you expose me, you expose him too. Selene's smile widened. You still do not understand, she said. The Dominion forgives shadow. It uses it. It fears Ember because Ember can rebuild what was taken. Ember can inspire people to rise. That is why you will be crushed. Selene stepped closer, voice dropping. And Rowan, she added, will be used until he breaks. She walked away before Ivy could respond, leaving Ivy with the sick certainty that Selene enjoyed this like sport. Not long after, Crow took Ivy through a portal at night. He did not explain where they were going until they were standing in a cavern that smelled of stone and ancient cold. The air was heavy, like it remembered prayers. In the center of the cavern lay a massive basin carved into the rock, runes etched along its rim. Dust and neglect coated it. The runes were dim, almost dead. Ivy's chest tightened. She knew without being told. This is it, she whispered. Crow nodded once. The Heartwell. Ivy stepped forward slowly, as if approaching a grave. She reached out and touched the stone rim. The moment her palm met the rune, heat surged up her arm, not painful but intense, like recognition. The runes flared amber, then steadied into a warm glow. The cavern hummed. Ivy's breath caught. It is awake, she whispered. Partially, Crow said. It remembers you. That is enough for now. Ivy stared into the empty basin. It is empty, she said, voice breaking. They took everything. Crow's jaw tightened. They drained it, he corrected. And then they left it to rot. This land has been starving ever since. Ivy's eyes burned. Rage rose, not the blind animal rage that made her lash out, but something sharper, more human, a sense of wrongness, theft. I can feel it, she said, barely breathing. I can feel it asking. Crow's gaze sharpened. Not tonight, he said. You are not ready. If you open yourself fully, it will drink until you are ash. The imagery made Ivy shiver, yet the pull did not fade. The Heartwell felt like a mouth pressed to her pulse. Crow placed guards at the cavern entrance, warded the space, then dragged Ivy back through the portal before dawn. When Ivy returned to the academy, she moved through the halls with the Heartwell's hum still in her bones. It made her restless, like she had touched something sacred, and now ordinary life felt wrong. In the morning, Rowan appeared in the dining hall. He looked better, bandaged under his uniform, but his eyes were darker than before, as if healing his ribs had done nothing to heal whatever had happened in Blackthorn lands. He sat across from Ivy without asking. Nora stiffened beside Ivy. Caleb's fingers tightened around his cup. Rowan's gaze stayed on Ivy. We need to talk, he said. Ivy's stomach clenched. About what? Rowan leaned forward slightly. About what comes next, he said. About Ronan, about my father, about you. Before Ivy could respond, Selene entered the dining hall like she owned it. She walked straight to their table. Her smile was bright, too bright. Well, Selene said, voice carrying just enough. Look at this. The traitor and the stray eating together. Rowan's eyes lifted to Selene, and cold settled over his expression like frost. Leave, he said. Selene laughed softly. No, she replied. Not today. Today we speak truth. Students around them started to watch. Ivy could hear the shift in the room, the way attention tightened like a noose. Selene's gaze slid to Ivy. "Tell me, Ivy," she said sweetly. "Did he tell you who killed your parents?" Ivy went still. Her heart slammed once hard. Rowan's jaw tightened. "Stop," he said, voice low. Selene ignored him. "Did he tell you," she repeated, "that his father's hands were red with Emberlynx blood?" Ivy's vision narrowed. She looked at Rowan, not wanting to, needing to. "Rowan," she whispered, "is that true?" Rowan's mouth opened, then closed. The silence was answer enough. A cold wave rolled through Ivy's body. It felt like the floor dropped away beneath her. Everything she had clung to in the last weeks, every moment of warmth stolen from his rare tenderness, turned to ash. "You knew," Ivy said, voice thin. Rowan's eyes locked on hers. "I did not know then," he said. "Then," Ivy echoed. "Then, when you kissed me, when you held me, when you looked at me like you could claim me." Rowan's voice stayed controlled, but something rough edged it. "I did not order my father to do anything," he said. Ivy's hands shook. The beast inside her stirred, sensing betrayal like blood in water. Selene's smile widened. "There," she said softly. "Now you see he is not your refuge. He is the shadow cast by the man who burned your house." Ivy stood so abruptly her chair scraped. Rowan's hand shot out and caught her wrist, grip firm. "Do not," he said. The touch made Ivy's skin crawl. She ripped her arm free. "Do not touch me," she whispered, and the words tasted like old trauma, like miles, like hands that took. Rowan went very still. Ivy turned and fled the dining hall, heart pounding, ears ringing. The corridor blurred as tears burned her eyes. She hated herself for crying. She hated Rowan for making her feel anything at all. She hated Selene for being right in the worst possible way. She ran until her lungs burned, until she found an empty stairwell and collapsed onto the steps, shaking. She pressed her fist to her mouth to keep from making sound. A door opened. Crow stepped in. He looked at Ivy for a moment, then said flatly, "Get up." Ivy's head snapped up, eyes wild. "Leave me alone." Crow's gaze did not soften. "Ronan Blackthorn is marching on the academy," he said. "An army, not a rumor, not a threat, marching." Ivy's blood turned to ice. Crow stepped closer. "The Chancellor is preparing an evacuation portal," he continued. "You are coming, now." Ivy stumbled to her feet, dizzy. "Where?" Crow's voice was sharp. "To the Heartwell." The word hit Ivy's chest like a drum beat. The cavern, the empty basin. The pull. Crow grabbed her elbow, not gentle, and dragged her through the corridors. Ivy barely registered students panicking, professors shouting instructions, wards flaring across doors. In the main hall, the air tasted like charged magic. Runes burned bright on the floor, forming a portal circle wide enough for groups to pass. The Chancellor stood at its center, face grim, hands lifted. He looked at Ivy. "We do not have time," he said. "Your people are already gathering at the Heartwell. Hundreds. They heard the rumors and came to see if you are real." "My people." The phrase cracked something in Ivy's chest, half hope, half terror. She had never belonged to anyone. Now she belonged to a target. A guard rushed in, breathless. "They are at the perimeter," he shouted. "Blackthorn forces are closing." The Chancellor's gaze hardened. "Then we move," he said. Crow shoved Ivy toward the portal. Ivy stumbled into the circle. The runes flared. The world twisted. The crossing was harsher this time. It slammed into her like a fist. Ivy's stomach lurched. Her vision went dark around the edges. When she stumbled out the other side, she fell to her knees on snow. Cold air punched into her lungs. She gagged, then retched, nothing coming up but bitter bile. Crow crouched beside her, voice tight. "Breathe," he ordered. You do not get to collapse yet. Ivy forced air into her lungs, shaking. The cavern entrance loomed nearby, guarded. Beyond it, the Hartwell hummed faintly. She could hear voices, many voices. Crow hauled her to her feet and half carried her forward. You need to see, he said. Inside the cavern, the sight stole Ivy's breath. Hundreds of people stood in the dim light. Some wore worn cloaks. Some carried weapons, some held children close. Their faces were turned toward the empty basin as if it were an altar. They turned when Ivy entered. A wave of attention hit her like heat. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Emberlynx, Heir, lynxskin, fire. Ivy's throat tightened until she could barely breathe. An older man stepped forward, eyes bright with something like grief and faith combined. You look like her, he said, voice rough. Like Dahlia. Ivy's eyes burned. She did not know him, yet she recognized the ache in his face. Someone who had waited too long for something that might never come. I do not know what to do, Ivy whispered. The man's gaze held hers. Just come home, he said. Home. The word cut deeper than any insult ever had. The Chancellor moved to Ivy's side, face pale with strain from holding the portal open. We have minutes, he said quietly. Blackthorn forces will follow the magic trail. If they find this place with these people gathered, it will be slaughter. Ivy stared at the basin. The runes were dim but awake, glowing under her earlier touch. The pull inside her grew stronger, as if the Hartwell sensed the approaching threat and begged. Crow's voice was low. You can feel it, he said, acknowledging what he had denied before. But if you do, it will take everything you have, and then it might take more. Ivy swallowed. Fear rose, huge and animal. The old Ridgeview fear of being punished for existing. The fear of being exposed. The fear of dying alone. Then she looked at the crowd again. They were not laughing at her. They were not calling her freak. They were waiting, trembling like people who had been starving and smelled food. Ivy stepped forward. Nora's voice echoed in her memory. Together. Caleb's face steadying her during panic. Breathe. Rowan's voice, cold command in the middle of her first shift. Stay with me. Selene's voice, cruel truth. Ember can rebuild. Ivy reached the basin and placed both palms on the stone rim. The runes flared bright amber. Heat surged up her arms, into her chest, into her throat. It was not pain at first. It was power, huge and intoxicating, like stepping into sunlight after years in a cellar. The Hartwell opened. Ivy felt it like a mouth, like a riverbed cracked and thirsty. It drank. Energy tore out of her, not like casting a spell, but like being emptied. The ember inside her poured into the basin in a steady roaring stream. Light filled the cavern, warm and gold, and the air smelled like pine smoke and new fire. The basin, empty for years, began to glow from within. The crowd gasped. Some fell to their knees, some wept openly. Ivy heard sobs and laughter mingling, the sound of people realizing they might live. The Hartwell filled faster. The runes on the cavern walls ignited. The stone itself seemed to breathe. Ivy's vision blurred. The power kept going, pouring out of her in relentless flow. Her arms trembled, her knees shook. Crow stepped closer, alarm sharpening his voice. Enough, he snapped. Stop, Ivy, stop. Ivy tried, she could not. The Hartwell did not ask politely. It pulled, it took. It fed on the ember in her blood like it had been starving for her specifically. I cannot, Ivy gasped, voice cracking. I cannot stop. The Chancellor swore under his breath and stepped to Crow's side. Together, they began forming containment runes, trying to cap the flow without snapping Ivy's channels. Ivy's body swayed. Her skin felt too hot. Her heartbeat stuttered. She tasted metal, but the basin was filling. The glow deepened, richer, steadier. The cavern hummed like a living thing waking fully. Then the power spilled outward. A dome of warm light erupted from the heartwell, expanding across the cavern entrance and out into the snowy valley beyond. It rolled over the gathered people, washing through them like sunlight and wildfire combined. Ivy heard gasps as old scars faded, as exhaustion lifted from shoulders, as eyes brightened with renewed strength. She saw a boy straighten from a limp. She saw an elderly woman lift her head, tears on her cheeks, and laugh like someone who had been young once. The crowd surged toward the entrance. A guard shouted from outside, "They are here. Blackthorn's scouts at the ridge." The newly strengthened people did not run. They grabbed weapons. They moved with purpose, like the Heartwell had put steel into their spines. Ivy tried to speak, to warn them, to beg them not to die for her, but the power pouring through her stole breath. She sagged against the basin, shaking violently. Crow's hands slammed down on the rim beside hers, runes flaring from his palms. "Chancellor," he snapped. "Now." The Chancellor's voice thundered a word Ivy did not recognize, and the containment snapped into place like a lid, not closing the heartwell fully, but redirecting the flow away from Ivy's body. The sudden reduction hit Ivy like a cliff edge. Her knees buckled. Darkness rose. The last thing she felt before blacking out was Crow's hand gripping her shoulder, hard, holding her upright as if sheer force could keep her alive. When Ivy came back to herself, she was lying on snow near the cavern entrance, wrapped in a cloak. The air was sharp and cold, and distant sounds carried up from the valley below. Battle, shouts, the crack of magic, the roar of beasts. Her body felt hollow, not tired, drained, as if someone had scooped out her insides and left only fragile skin. She tried to sit up and nearly vomited again. Crow crouched beside her, face drawn, eyes bloodshot with strain. The Chancellor stood a few steps away, leaning heavily on a staff, his usual calm cracked by exhaustion. "You are alive," Crow said. "No comfort, just fact." Ivy's voice was a rasp. "Did it work?" The Chancellor answered, voice rough. "Yes," he said. "The Heartwell is awake." A sound rose from below, a deep rumble that vibrated in Ivy's bones, not thunder, something alive. Ivy pushed herself up onto her elbows, blinking through dizziness. Down in the valley, figures moved in chaos. Shadow magic lashed like smoke. Fire burst in bright arcs. People fought, not with clean heroic motions, but with desperation and fury. Then Ivy saw him. Ronan Blackthorn stood at the edge of the battle like a man watching dogs tear each other apart. Even from this distance, his presence felt wrong, heavy, like a stain. He wore dark armor trimmed in silver, and around him shadow curled as if it loved him. Beside him stood Selene Frost. Ivy's stomach dropped. Selene's face was calm, her gaze fixed on the ridge on Ivy's position. Even here, even now, she looked satisfied. Ronan lifted his head slowly, as if scenting the ember in Ivy even after she had poured herself into the heartwell. His mouth curved into a smile that made Ivy's skin crawl. He began walking uphill toward her. The guards at the ridge tried to intercept. Shadow flared, and they fell back as if hit by invisible force. Ivy's pulse stuttered. She tried to stand, and her legs nearly gave out. "I cannot fight him," she whispered, voice breaking. "I cannot even shift." Crow's gaze snapped to hers, sharp. "Then you will not," he said. "You will live." Ronan's voice carried up the slope, amplified by magic, smooth and terrible. "So there you are," he called. Little Ember. Ivy's skin prickled. The beast inside her stirred, weak but angry. Ronan's gaze flicked to the cavern entrance behind her. "You woke it," he said, admiration and hatred braided together. "Your father and mother would be proud." Ivy's throat tightened. "Do not speak of them." Ronan laughed softly. "Why?" he asked. "Because it hurts. Good pain makes you honest." He stopped several yards away, shadow coiling around his boots like living smoke. Selene remained behind him, watching. Ronan tilted his head. "Where is Crow?" he asked conversationally. "Where is the Chancellor? Did they think they could hide you forever?" Crow stepped into view, eyes cold. "Leave," he said to Ronan, voice flat. Ronan's smile widened. "Oh, I will," he replied. "After I take what I came for." He lifted his hand. Shadow gathered, forming a spear of darkness aimed straight at Ivy's heart. Ivy tried to move. Her body did not respond fast enough. Then someone stepped between her and the spear. Rowan. He appeared like a shadow tearing free of the air itself, coat snapping in the wind, eyes dark and burning. He planted his feet, shoulders squared, as if he had decided the world could break against him and he would still stand. "Brother," Rowan said. Ronan's smile turned delighted. "There you are," he purred. "I was wondering if you would come crawling back." Rowan did not glance at Ivy, but Ivy felt him anyway, felt the wall of him, the protection, the danger. His voice was cold enough to freeze breath. "Move," he said to Ronan. "Do not make me do it." Ronan's gaze glittered. "Make you," he repeated. "You still think you are the one who chooses." Rowan's jaw clenched. Ivy stared at Rowan's back, dizzy with shock and relief and fear. He was here. He had come, not too late. Selene's gaze flicked to Ivy and her mouth curved. Ivy realized Selene was enjoying this not just because Ivy might die, but because Rowan might break. Ronan's voice turned almost gentle. "Tell her," he said to Rowan. "Tell her why you really came." Rowan's shoulders tightened. "I came to stop you," he said. Ronan laughed. "Liar," he murmured. "You came because you cannot stand to watch something you want be taken by someone else." Ivy's throat tightened. "Want." Like she was an object. Rowan spoke again, voice harsher. "I came because you will not touch her." Ronan's gaze sharpened. "And why do you care?" he asked. "Is it love? Is it obsession? Is it rebellion?" Rowan went very still. Then he said, "Because my father killed her parents." Ivy's breath caught, the words hitting her again like a wound. Rowan continued, voice tight. "And he killed my mother too." Silence seemed to fall for a heartbeat, even with battle roaring below. Ivy's eyes widened. "Rowan," she whispered. Rowan did not turn. He kept his gaze on Ronan. "He told me she died sick," he said, voice shaking slightly with contained rage. "He told me she was weak, but she did not die sick. She died screaming." Ronan's smile did not fade. "And you stayed," he said softly. "You stayed in the den. You learned our ways. You wore our shadow like a crown." Rowan's hands clenched into fists. "I was a child," he said. Ronan's voice was sweet. "So was she," he replied, nodding toward Ivy without looking. "And look how well she survived. Hidden, sheltered, protected." Rowan's shoulders rose and fell with a controlled inhale. Then he said quietly, "I am done." Ronan's eyes brightened like a predator sensing the start of a chase. "Show me," he whispered. Rowan moved. Shadow exploded from him, not as smoke, but as a living force, forming claws, tendrils, a mantle of darkness that made him look larger, more dangerous. His eyes flashed with a faint silver sheen. The air around him dimmed as if light itself was afraid. Ronan laughed and answered with his own power, darker, thicker, a shadow that felt like rot. The first clash cracked the ground. Ivy flinched as invisible force slammed outward, kicking up snow. She felt the shockwave in her bones. Rowan fought like someone who had spent his life learning how to survive cruelty. Precise, brutal, efficient. He did not waste movement. He did not show off. He closed distance, drove Ronan back step by step, shadow against shadow in a duel that felt like watching two storms collide. Ronan was stronger at first. His magic was heavier, older, fed by conquest. He hurled spears of darkness that shattered stone. He laughed when Rowan bled as if it delighted him. Rowan did not laugh. Rowan absorbed the blows, redirected them, endured. His face was stone, but Ivy could see the strain and the tightness around his mouth, in the way his shoulders shook when he took a hit he should not have survived. Ivy's hands trembled. She tried to call fire, tried to summon even a spark. Nothing came. She was empty. Crow stood near her, posture steady despite exhaustion, eyes fixed on the duel like he was calculating outcomes. The Chancellor remained farther back, gathering what little strength he could. Selene watched with shining eyes, her hands clasped calmly as if she were at a concert. Ronan lunged, closing in with a blade of pure shadow. Rowan twisted, caught Ronan's wrist, and drove his knee up into Ronan's ribs. The impact echoed. Ronan hissed, then smiled, and headbutted Rowan hard enough that Rowan stumbled. Blood streaked from Rowan's brow. Ivy's stomach turned. "Rowan," she whispered, helpless. Rowan steadied, wiped the blood away with the back of his hand, and stared at Ronan with a cold ferocity that made Ivy shiver. "Again," Rowan said. Ronan's grin widened. "Gladly." They collided again. This time Rowan shifted tactics. He slipped inside Ronan's reach, shadow wrapping around Ronan's arm, and wrenched. Ronan's blade shattered into smoke. Rowan drove his elbow into Ronan's jaw, then slammed him backward into a stone outcrop. Ronan hit hard, snow spraying. For a heartbeat, Rowan had him. Rowan's shadow claw formed into something like a blade in his hand, pointed straight at Ronan's throat. Ronan looked up at him, blood at the corner of his mouth. He did not look afraid. "Do it," Ronan whispered, eyes gleaming. "Be like us. Prove you are my brother." Rowan's entire body trembled with restraint. Ivy could see it now, the true war inside him, not against Ronan's power, but against the act Ronan wanted to force. Rowan's voice was ragged. "You deserve it." Ronan smiled. "Yes," he murmured. "So give it to me." Rowan's hand shook. Ivy realized with sudden clarity that if Rowan killed Ronan, it would not free him, it would chain him. Ronan would win by turning Rowan into what he hated. Rowan's eyes squeezed shut for a fraction of a second. Then Ronan moved. He struck upward, a hidden spike of shadow shooting toward Rowan's chest. Rowan jerked back, but not enough. The shadow spike pierced into Rowan's side. Rowan gasped, stumbling, his blade of shadow flickering. Ivy's heart stopped. Ronan rose to his feet, smiling through blood. "There," he said softly. "That is what happens when you hesitate." Rowan swayed, one hand pressed to his side, blood dark against snow. He lifted his head anyway, eyes burning with rage and refusal. He stepped forward again. Ronan laughed. "Stubborn," he murmured, "like her." He turned his head slightly, gaze sliding past Rowan toward Ivy. "Now," Ronan said, voice thick with anticipation, "I take the ember." Rowan's body shifted instantly, blocking the line of attack again, even injured, even trembling. "No," Rowan said. Ronan lifted his hand. A massive wave of shadow gathered, heavier than before, aiming to crush Rowan aside like an insect and then swallow Ivy whole. Crow moved. He did not shout. He did not perform. He climbed the ridge with grim purpose, breath steaming, his movements slower from exhaustion but relentless. In his hand was a sword. Ronan's sword, fallen earlier in the chaos, its metal dark and cruel, humming with residual power. Rowan did not see Crow at first. He was braced against Ronan's rising storm, trying to hold his ground with sheer will. Crow reached Ronan from behind. Ronan's attention was fixed on Rowan and Ivy on triumph. Crow raised the sword. For a heartbeat, Ivy saw Crow's face. Not cold now, not controlled. Grief sat there, old and deep, and underneath it a vow like iron. Then Crow drove the blade into Ronan's back. Ronan froze. The wave of shadow faltered, then collapsed like smoke in wind. Ronan's mouth opened slightly. His eyes widened in shock, then slowly turned vicious. He looked down at the blade protruding through his chest. Blood seeped dark into the snow. Crow's voice was low, almost gentle. "This is for Dahlia," he said. Ronan's lips curved faintly. "Ah," he whispered, and there was amusement even in death. "So you still love her." Crow's jaw clenched. Ronan coughed, blood on his lips. His eyes flicked to Rowan. "You see," he whispered, "even when you try to stay clean, someone else dirties their hands for you." Rowan stared at Ronan, face white with shock and fury and something like heartbreak twisted into rage. "Crow," Rowan snarled. Crow did not pull the blade out immediately. He held Ronan steady, ensuring the end. Ronan's body sagged, then went still. Silence hit the ridge, thick and unreal. Then Rowan made a sound Ivy had never heard from him, something raw and broken. He lurched forward, grabbing Crow by the front of his coat with sudden, violent strength. "That was mine," Rowan hissed, voice shaking. "He was mine. I was supposed to do it." Crow did not fight him. He let Rowan shake him, let the anger pour out. Crow's eyes met Rowan's, calm again, but not cold. "No," Crow said quietly. "You were not." Rowan's breath came in harsh bursts. "You had no right." Crow's voice remained steady. "I had every right," he said. "I will not let him take your soul too." Rowan's hands trembled on Crow's coat. His eyes burned, then flicked toward Ivy for the first time since the duel began. Ivy stared back, shaking, tears freezing on her lashes. She had hated him minutes ago. She had wanted him gone. Now she felt only the sick relief of being alive and the deeper sickness of realizing she cared if he lived. Rowan released Crow abruptly and staggered backward, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. He swayed. Ivy tried to stand and nearly fell. Crow caught her elbow automatically, steadying her. Rowan's gaze snapped to Crow's hand on Ivy, and something dangerous flickered in his expression even now, even wounded. Possession. Fear. A need to control what he could when everything else was ash. Crow let go of Ivy immediately, as if he recognized the look and refused to feed it. The battle below began to shift. Without Ronan's shadow pressing down, Blackthorn forces faltered. The strengthened people surged, pushing them back, not cleanly, not without loss, but with a fury lit by newly restored power. Selene Frost stepped back slowly, eyes on Ronan's body. For a moment, Ivy thought Selene would scream or weep. Instead, Selene's face remained calm. Her gaze lifted to Ivy, and her smile returned, faint and chilling. Then Selene turned and vanished into the chaos below, slipping away like a rumor. Ivy opened her mouth to shout, but no sound came. Crow's voice was grim. "Let her go," he said. "Not today. We secure the Heartwell first." Ivy's throat tightened. Let her go. Selene had threatened her, blackmailed her, tried to break her. Now she escaped. It felt unfair. It felt real. Rowan sank to one knee, breathing hard. Ivy forced her legs to move, stumbling toward him despite dizziness. She stopped a step away, unsure if she was allowed to touch him, unsure if she wanted to. Rowan looked up at her, eyes dark and stripped bare by pain and adrenaline. "You are alive," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement, as if he had demanded the universe comply. Ivy swallowed. "So are you." Rowan's mouth twitched, almost a smile, then flattened again. "Do not thank me," he said. Ivy's eyes stung. "I was not going to." Rowan stared at her for a long moment. His gaze dropped to her trembling hands, then back to her face. For a heartbeat, something softened in him, brief and startling. "You were beautiful," he said quietly, voice rough. "In the hall." Terrifying but beautiful. The words hit Ivy like a bruise and a balm at the same time. She hated that they mattered. She hated that she wanted more of them. She whispered, "You cannot say things like that." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "Why?" he asked. "Because you might believe me." Ivy's breath caught. Rowan shifted slightly, pain flashing across his face. The moment of softness snapped shut, replaced by cold control again. "Go," he said, voice hard, "before I bleed on your shoes." Ivy's throat tightened. "Rowan," his gaze cut into hers like a blade. "Go," he repeated. "If you stay here looking at me like that, I will do something stupid." Ivy did not know what that meant, and the not knowing was its own kind of fear. Crow stepped in, practical. "Healers," he said. "Now." Rowan did not argue. He let Crow and a guard support him down the ridge, though his pride made every step stiff. Ivy watched him go, heart twisting, feeling vulnerable in a way she had never chosen. The man who scared her, who controlled the air around him, who kissed her like a claim, had also stepped between her and death. And his father had killed her parents. Both truths lived in her now, tangled, impossible to separate cleanly. In the weeks that followed, the Dominion changed around the rumor of Ember. The Heartwell did not fix everything overnight. Land did not heal instantly. Politics did not soften, but something shifted. People who had lived under shadow began to believe again. That belief was dangerous. It drew attention. It drew knives. The academy tightened security. Wards strengthened. Crow became a constant presence, his eyes always calculating. The Chancellor's hair seemed to turn whiter in a month. Ivy trained until her body stopped shaking when she called fire. She learned to shift partially without losing her mind, claws and eyes and strength under deliberate control. She learned to ride the line between human and beast like a blade edge. Nora stayed at her side through all of it, stubborn and loyal. Caleb did too, his gentle steadiness becoming a kind of quiet shield. When Ivy doubted herself, Nora cursed at her until she laughed, and when Ivy hated herself, Caleb looked at her like she was still worth saving. Rowan healed slower than he admitted. Broken ribs took time. The wound from Ronan's shadow spike left a scar that sometimes ached when storms rolled in. He hated being weak. He hated needing healers. He hated, most of all, how easily Ivy could see it. He avoided her at first, then began appearing at the edges of her life again like he could not stop himself. Sometimes he said nothing, just watched her train, eyes unreadable. Sometimes he spoke in short, cold commands that made her bristle and obey anyway. One evening, after Ivy finished a brutal control drill that left her shaking, Rowan stepped close and grabbed her wrist. His grip was firm, grounding. "You are burning too hot," he said. Ivy glared at him. "I am fine." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "You are lying," he said. "You always lie when you are close to collapse." Ivy's throat tightened. "And you always think you can control me." Rowan's mouth curved faintly. "I can," he said. The words sent heat through Ivy, anger, and something darker. She yanked her wrist free. Try, she snapped. Rowan stepped closer, shadows stirring faintly at his feet like restless animals. The air tightened. Then his hand lifted, not to grab, but to brush a stray strand of hair off Ivy's face. The touch was so gentle it did not match him. It lasted half a second. Ivy froze, Rowan's voice dropped. "Do not die," he said quietly. "Not for them, not for the Hartwell, not for pride, not for revenge." Ivy's eyes stung. "Why do you care?" Rowan's jaw tightened. The tenderness vanished. "I told you," he said coldly. "Do not ask for softness I cannot afford." He turned and walked away, leaving Ivy trembling, furious, and aching. Selene never returned to Westridge after the battle. Rumors said she transferred overseas. Rumors said her family moved with her to avoid suspicion. Rumors said she was seen once in a foreign port with a hooded companion and a smile like a secret. Ivy did not trust rumors. She trusted the cold instinct that Selene was still out there somewhere, waiting for the right moment. Time moved forward anyway, relentless as seasons. Ivy graduated. The day she stood in the academy hall in her formal uniform, receiving her certification, she felt the old Ridgeview girl inside her flinch, expecting someone to laugh, expecting the world to yank it away at the last moment. It did not. Nora whooped loud enough to embarrass half the room. Caleb smiled so warmly Ivy's chest tightened. Crow stood at the edge of the crowd, expression controlled, but his gaze held something like pride that he would never admit out loud. Rowan watched from the shadows as always. After the ceremony, he approached Ivy when the hall thinned. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were intense, fixed on her like he was measuring a future. "You did not collapse," he said. Ivy's lips twitched. "I am disappointed, too." Rowan's mouth curved slightly. A real smile, brief and rare, like sunlight in winter. Then the cold returned. "Come with me," he said. Ivy's heart jumped, that familiar, vulnerable response to his command. She hated that it still existed. She followed anyway. Outside, snow fell softly. Rowan stopped under a stone arch where the wind was quieter. "I am entering service," he said. "Arcane Bureau." Ivy's stomach tightened. The Bureau meant politics and danger and missions that did not come back clean. "Why?" Rowan's gaze held hers. "Because if I do not stand between you and the Dominion," he said, "the Dominion will decide what you are for." Ivy swallowed. "And what am I for?" Rowan's voice lowered. "For rebuilding," he said. "For hope, for war, for whatever they can extract. I do not want anyone owning you." Ivy's chest tightened. "You say that like you do not want to own me yourself." Rowan stepped closer. His presence filled the space, cold and heavy. "I do," he said simply. Ivy's breath caught. Rowan's eyes flicked to her mouth, then back up. "But I am trying," he added, voice rougher, "to want you like a person, not like a claim." The confession shook Ivy. It was ugly honesty. It was also the closest thing to tenderness he knew how to give. Ivy whispered, "That is terrifying." Rowan's mouth curved faintly. "Yes," he said. "Get used to it." Life continued, not soft, not simple, but real. Ivy stayed for advanced study, deepening her control, learning how to feed the heart well without letting it devour her. She learned diplomacy because power without words became blood. She learned to listen to land, to people, to the way fear moved through crowds like wind. Rowan served the Bureau, returning in stretches, leaving again, always walking the edge of danger like it was home. Sometimes he came back bruised and silent. Sometimes he came back cold and angry. Sometimes, rarely, he came back and held Ivy in the dark without speaking, his arms tight around her as if he needed to prove she was still there. Those rare nights made Ivy feel both safe and trapped. She would lie awake, listening to his breathing, feeling the weight of his protectiveness and the sharpness of his control. She learned how to speak to him when he was like that. "You can let go," she would whisper. Rowan would never admit fear. But sometimes his grip would loosen just a fraction, like he heard her and chose, for one moment, not to be made entirely of shadow. Crow did something Ivy never expected. He opened a portal, not for war, but for a person. Margaret Caldwell stepped into Etheria with stiff posture and familiar controlled eyes, looking around as if the world itself offended her. Ivy's first reaction was rage so hot she nearly lost control. Memories of Ridgeview slammed into her, the isolation, the manipulation, the casual cruelty. Crow stood beside Caldwell, watching Ivy carefully. "I brought her," he said simply, "because I am done running from my own choices, so is she." Caldwell looked at Ivy, her composure wavering for a heartbeat. "You survived," she said. Ivy's voice was sharp. "Despite you." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "Yes," she said quietly. "Despite me." The admission did not erase anything, but it cracked the wall enough for something new to grow in the fracture. Over time, Crow and Caldwell built a life that looked nothing like either of them. They became, in their own strict, imperfect way, a family. When twins were born years later, Ivy stood holding two small, warm bodies and felt her chest ache with the strangest grief and joy combined. She was named their godmother, and the title felt unreal. Like the world had finally decided she was not only a weapon or a symbol, but someone safe enough to hold a child. Caleb married Alyssa before graduation, and Ivy watched him smile at the altar with a softness Ivy used to believe did not survive in violent worlds. Nora started something messy and loud with Evan, one of Rowan's friends, and insisted it was not romance even while her eyes betrayed her. 5.5 years after the Hartwells' awakening, Ivy stood in front of a mirror while Nora adjusted the lace on her wedding dress. The room was warm, filled with soft candlelight and the faint scent of winter roses. Outside the window, snow fell gently. The Hartwell hummed faintly in the distance like a heartbeat that no longer sounded hungry. Nora stepped back, hands on hips, eyes narrowed with perfectionist focus. "Do not move," she said. Ivy laughed under her breath, nerves and gratitude tangled together. "You have turned into a tyrant." Nora snorted. "I learned from the best," she said. "Now breathe, your shoulders are rising." Ivy forced herself to inhale slowly. She stared at her reflection. The girl in the mirror did not look like a Ridgeview orphan. She looked like a woman with fire in her eyes and steadiness in her posture. Her pendant, the lynx, rested against her collarbone, its amber eyes calm and warm, no longer a warning but a promise. Her diary sat on a table nearby, open to a page she had written the night before. "I am not hiding anymore." A knock sounded at the door. Nora's gaze sharpened. "If that is Rowan, I will stab him if he tries to see you early." Ivy's heart jumped anyway. "It is not Rowan," Caleb's voice called through the door, amused. "It is me." "I brought the flowers," Nora demanded like a warlord. Nora opened the door, snatched the bouquet, and slammed it shut again, muttering, "Good, go away." Ivy laughed, then abruptly felt tears burn. Nora turned back, expression softening. "Hey," she said, quieter now, "do not fall apart. You will ruin the makeup." Ivy pressed a hand to her chest. I do not know why I am crying, she whispered. Nora's gaze held hers. Because you are not used to good things staying, she said. The truth of it hit Ivy so hard she had to sit. Nora knelt in front of her, hands firm on Ivy's knees. Listen, Nora said. You fought for this, you bled for it. You did not get saved by a prince. You became the thing that saved you. Rowan is not a prize, he is a choice, and you are choosing each other. Ivy swallowed hard. He scares me sometimes. Nora nodded, not surprised. He should, she said bluntly. He is frightening. He is built from knives and bad blood. But I have seen him look at you like you are the only real thing in his world. That matters. Ivy whispered, what if one day he becomes his father? Nora's eyes sharpened. Then you burn him, she said without hesitation. And he knows it. That is why he tries so hard to stay human with you. A knock came again, slower this time. Nora stood ready to murder. The door opened a fraction and Crow's voice came through, calm and controlled. It is time, he said. Ivy's heart pounded. Time. Nora took Ivy's hands and squeezed once. Remember, she said. Breathe, head high, you are not a stray anymore. Ivy stood. When she walked down the corridor toward the ceremonial hall, she felt the old fear trying to rise, the fear of eyes and judgment and sudden cruelty. She breathed through it. She let it exist without obeying it. The hall doors opened. Rowan stood waiting at the front, dressed in dark, formal attire that made him look like a blade given human form. His posture was rigid, controlled. His face was calm, cold even, but his eyes gave him away. They were fixed on Ivy with an intensity that made her skin prickle. As she approached, she realized his hands were clenched, tight enough to tremble. He was scared too, in his own way, not of her, but of losing what this meant. When Ivy reached him, Rowan leaned in slightly, voice low so only she could hear. You look like fire, he murmured. Ivy's throat tightened. You look like trouble. Rowan's mouth twitched faintly. Good, he said. Then we match. The officiant began speaking, words about bonds and vows and the joining of houses. Ivy heard it distantly, like music under a stronger sound. She heard her own heartbeat. She heard Rowan's breath. She felt the weight of every step that had brought her here. Ridgeview's cold halls, Miles's hands on her chin, the taste of humiliation. The first time she saw claws where nails should be, the portal opening like a wound in reality. The heartwell empty and waiting, Ronan's smile, Crow's blade. Rowan standing between her and death, the officiant asked for vows. Rowan spoke first, voice low and steady. His words were simple, not poetic. Promise to protect, promise to stand, promise to choose her even when it was hard. Then Ivy spoke. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. I spent my life believing I was something people endured, she said. A burden, a problem, a monster, but I am not those things. I am Ivy Emberlynx. I am fire. I am a person. And I choose you, Rowan Vale, not because you are safe, but because you are trying. Because you stand in your own darkness and refuse to let it swallow you. Rowan's eyes held hers, fierce and bright with something he would never call tenderness but could not hide. When the officiant declared them bound, Rowan's hand closed around Ivy's, firm and grounding. He leaned in, voice low, a private threat and promise wrapped together. You are mine, he murmured. Ivy's breath caught, old fear and new trust colliding inside her. She lifted her chin. And you are mine, she whispered back. Do not forget it. For a heartbeat, Rowan's expression softened, rare and real. Then he kissed her, not as a spectacle, not as a claim to prove something to an audience. As a vow he could not speak any other way. Ivy felt the ember inside her flare warm and bright, not wild, not destructive, but steady like a hearth. She did not shift. She did not break. She simply stood there, held by shadow and surrounded by people who did not look at her like a monster anymore. And for the first time in her life, the future did not feel like a door about to slam shut. It felt like something she was allowed to walk into. If your power could hurt everyone you care about, would you hide yourself to keep them safe? Or reveal the truth and risk becoming a target?